Welcome to Let's Talk Space Medicine. I'm your host, Kyle Anderson. For your listening entertainment, I gather my other medically inclined space nerd friends to talk all things space medicine. With our powers combined, we hope to explore and entertain the medical questions that stand between us and the stars. And for today's show, we have Major Alexander Haley, a United States Air Force flight surgeon with the 35th Medical Group, who I had the pleasure of meeting at the Johnson Space Center Aerospace Medicine clerkship in April 2024, where we got to know each other. He got to drive me around in his Mustang, and we did all the cool tours and got to meet a whole bunch of other space nerds there, and where I got to learn a little bit about his journey. But the reason I wanted to bring him on the podcast is because we haven't really seen a lot of the Air Force represented in the people that I know and work with, and so I wanted to hear his perspective and what he wants to do. But to start, Alex, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. And I just want to say, can you start off by just saying where you're at, how you're doing, and your journey in space medicine? Where did it all start?
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. Thanks again for having me on the your podcast here. Like I said, it's a real honor, and real pleasure as well. So I am currently in Misawa Air Base, Japan, and that is most people probably never heard of it. I hadn't until I was in the Air Force. It is a small fighter base at the very north end of the main island of Japan. There's actually like a little geographic. It almost looks like an axe, like a hatchet sticking off the top of the island, and we're at the base of that hatchet. So, actually, interestingly enough, there's a Japanese naval base up at the blade of the hatchet that has the closest dive chamber, the closest hyperbaric chamber to us, and so that's the one that we would use ordinarily in a hyperbaric emergency, or rather a hypobaric emergency for one of our pilots. But yeah, so I'm in northern Japan. I've been here for just under a year now, and it's definitely a very interesting place. Been very busy, very, very busy. This base is extremely busy. Pacific Air Forces are very busy right now because of a lot of geopolitical maneuvering. And so we've had a lot of interesting developments, exercises, things like that. So yeah, been doing quite a bit up here, and it's it's kept me on my toes to a bit. So
Yeah, I definitely want to jump into like kind of your day to day, like what does it look like? So we can either go down that road, or we can talk about how you got interested in, in being in the Air Force, or we can start from the beginning, or we can jump right into your day to day, whatever you choose.
I'd say it's up to you. Either way, I'm happy to go.
I always
We
like to ask people, what is their, their Spider-Man origin story? Like, how did did you get bit by a radioactive spider? Did you, just land on planet Earth after coming in from Krypton?
That's right.
How did space medicine ever enter your world? When did that happen?
Yeah, I was created in a lab. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, so space medicine. A funny thing, my life trajectory has been very, I don't know, like when I think about it, I think about like a pinball machine, just like the ball bouncing around and all sorts of stuff in a way. Um, So I wasn't like most people that like grew up, or I shouldn't say most people, many people who come to medicine who grow up kind of pretty early on, like they think I really want to be a doctor or I want to be a veterinarian, something like that. I had zero interest or desire to be a doctor for most of my upbringing. Yeah, not so much like I wasn't interested, just that it didn't even occur to me, like it didn't even cross my mind as a thing to do. Um, since I was a little kid, I always loved space. I don't know exactly where that came from. Like neither of my parents are giant space nerds. They both like space stuff and think it's cool, but like neither of them were had any real dealings with space at all. I mean, my dad saw like, the Challenger accident on TV. And he does have a pretty strong memory of watching the footage from Neil Armstrong, landing on the moon and things like that, and just being like amazed that humans were on the moon. But as a kid, but it wasn't like he was like, oh, okay, now I'm a space lover, right? So I don't really know where that came from for me, but like my earliest memories, I had a bunch of books on space, and I would just read them cover to cover. I mean, I was always reading as a kid. I was fascinated with just anything and everything I could find in a book, and so I guess at some point my parents decided to get me books on. I had books on all sorts of stuff like geology and other random stuff too, but I had like a whole. There was like a whole like three or four of these big books. I think they were. I don't even remember what they were now, but some kind of space books, and they had like all the planets and like really cool pictures and like all these facts about all the different planets and space and all sorts of space phenomena. And I would just like devour those voraciously. And I would go back and like once a month and reread them like as a kid. So
Maybe
they
just
were like
had
my
bad
favorite.
memory. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. No, but yeah, so I was a total space nerd like from the start pretty much. Loved everything to do with space. And I mean pretty early on I was like I want to be an astronaut, like so many kids do, I guess. Um but never really considered a whole lot beyond like how does one become an astronaut? It just sort of was like, oh, I'm going to grow up and be an astronaut. And then as I got a little bit older, um, I started, as I got closer to like going to college and whatnot, I started thinking like, oh, okay, like what am I going to do with my life, right? And so another thing that I saw at some point growing up was um, I saw the movie Good Will Hunting, and I don't know why, but it really was something that kind of connected to me for some reason. I don't really know because I'm not from Boston. I've never been to Boston like once. And I'm not a genius or anything like that, and certainly not a janitor either. So I don't really know why, but I love that movie. And so, and that movie for some reason was like made me go like, I want to go to MIT. That's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go to MIT. And then I decided, well, okay, so I love space stuff. I want to go to MIT. Well, I got to study something there. What do I want to study? Well, I'll study astrophysics. And so then my goal was to get a PhD in astrophysics, and that was like that was what I wanted to do for basically until I got into college. And so, quick sidebar on that. So, in let's see, it would have been, I guess, like middle school, maybe something like that. My dad somehow ended up finding out that the Fort Worth Youth Orchestra had a division, a string orchestra division that was specifically for like pre-college age kids. Um, and so I played violin at the time. And so he was like, "Hey, like you should, this seems like a really cool opportunity. Would you want to do this?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, sounds good." So I auditioned, I got in, and then during the course of playing, and I played with them for around some years. I can't remember now how many years, but basically since I was from the time I was like I don't know, maybe like 10-ish or something to like the time I went off to college, so 5, 6 years, something like that. Anyway, but the reason I bring this up is while we were at one of the rehearsals, my dad ended up talking to one of the parents there from one of the other kids, and they were like, "Oh, my kid's applying to TAMS," and my dad was like, "What's a TAMS?" And the parents were like, "Oh, it's the Texas Academy of Mathematics and Science." So it's a like a boarding school program essentially paid for by the state of Texas at University of North Texas where they have all of these kids in a specific dorm that's only for these kids because they're all minors, right? And there's basically what you do is you apply to it like you're applying to college. You have to take the SAT and everything like that. You have to interview, and then if you get selected, you drop out of high school after your sophomore year, and then you do your junior and senior year of high school there, taking all college courses at UNT. And so it's kind of a nice way to condense your first 2 years of college and last 2 years of high school into 2 years. And so as a kid, I was always pretty bored by school. And I don't mean that to say, oh, look at me, I'm so smart. But I really just was kind of bored by it
I think a lot
because
of people can relate to that, to be honest.
yeah, I
No
feel like
matter
it's
like no
pretty
matter where
common.
you are, like either you're hitting it like you're way too smart and you don't belong, or like, it just doesn't a lot of people at school doesn't relate to them. So that totally makes sense.
Yeah, well, I'm glad I'm not the only one.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so I was kind of like, my dad told me about this. He's like, hey, basically, hey, would you want to go to college early? And I mean, I jumped at that. I was like, holy cow, like I can get out of, I can get out of boring old school 2 years early and go to college. Like, I was like, absolutely, that is absolutely what I want to do. And so I set my sights on doing that. I think I learned about that around the time I was in eighth grade, seventh or eighth grade. And so from that point on, I was like, okay, I'm going to go to TAMS. And then from TAMS, I'm going to go to MIT. And then from at MIT, I'm going to study astrophysics and then go be an astronaut because that's how that works, apparently.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Very
that's,
linear thinking, right? That's like just
yeah,
how we
that,
all grow up and we think everything is going to be A to B to C instead of
right.
A to Z to B to Y to, everything.
Yeah, turns out that the real world's a little messier than what I had in my kid brain. So anyway, so I did that with Tams. It was definitely an interesting experience. I mean, highly recommend. If if you were like me and bored of school and you live in Texas, anybody out there who's listening, put your kid in TAMS. It's a great program. And also importantly, it's free to the parents. Well, you have to pay for room and board, but that's it. And the state covers the rest of the stuff. But it was awesome. I met a lot of cool people. Everybody else there was way smarter than me. I felt like kind of an idiot. And because I'd grown up not really being super engaged by school, to be honest, I never really developed good study habits. And so that kind of came out to bite me in TAMS, where I didn't study very well for college level courses. And you pretty much have to, unless you're an absolute genius. And again, I'm not. So I had a little bit of tough times with grades. I'd always been a straight A student, except for like one B in English class in my sophomore year, because I was like, I'm going to TAMS, screw this, you know. I just didn't do some homework. But yeah, well, at TAMS, I definitely did not make straight A's, and I was like a wake up call for me, a real kind of an ego death for a bit, especially also being around all these kids who were smarter than me. But anyway, so during that time, though, an important point in my life occurred, and that was when I took calculus for the first time. Uh, and I had always, again, been like, I'm going to go be an astrophysicist. And then I took calculus one, and I was like, what is this? Like, I don't get this at all. This doesn't make any sense to me. I was never like, I would say I was never super good at math. I never really liked math that much. I thought it was kind of boring. Like algebra, I thought was fine, but generally speaking, like I wasn't a big numbers guy.
Yeah.
So I can do math well enough, but like it never really did stuff for me. Versus like some of the kids that I went to school with, the TAMs were like absolute math geniuses and like would solve do proofs in their free time because they enjoyed it. And I was just like, I don't know what's wrong with you, but that's
I
not
can't relate
me.
to that.
No, no, and to be fair, there's nothing wrong with people who do that, but
Yeah, yeah.
as kid me was like, that sounds terrible. Um, but yeah, so anyway, so I did Cal one, and my teacher was great. Like he was Dr. Quintanilla, great professor, really, really good at explaining calculus stuff, but I just was not super interested in learning calculus, to be honest. And so I sort of, and at that point in my life, I really hadn't encountered a whole lot that I hadn't been pretty good at right off the bat. And so meeting this, was an immediate like, ew, I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
This isn't just immediately easy, and I don't really like love the source material anyway. So I sort of like struggled through it, and I got through. I don't remember, I got a C or a B in the class, but I think it was a C. But it sort of like was a slap in the face, and I was like, oh man, like, oh, I can't be a physicist if I don't if I can't do calculus. So,
Yeah, you like
um,
you saw this like barrier and you're like, what do I do now? I have to reevaluate my whole thing.
yeah, exactly. I was kind of like this, it really kind of shattered my plan, as silly as it was at the time, because yeah, I was immediately like, I can't do this. And then I did a little bit better in Cal 2, but not really. I would say not really because of my own doing. The teacher actually was starting to have Alzheimer's, and so like she would sometimes forget to show up to class, or sometimes like go to the bathroom and like get lost, or like forget that she had class and stuff. So like we had probably about 50% of our classes where we just didn't get to learn the stuff we were supposed to learn. So at the end of the course, the school basically decided to curve everybody up a letter grade on that course, and then remove her from teaching. It was really a sad situation.
Wow, yeah,
But
that was unexpected. That's I'm sorry to
yeah,
hear
yeah, I
that.
know, right? It was kind of wild, but I felt really bad for her because she was super nice. But Yeah, it was tough to see. It's tougher thinking back on it as an adult now, having,
Hmm.
had some first go through dementia and things like that. It's like, man, that sucks.
Yeah.
But yeah, so all that is to say, I didn't learn calculus very well, both because of my own issues and because of the particular school circumstances. But it became pretty clear to me that like calculus is not something that I really want slash can have as part of my professional life. I just didn't
Yeah.
get it well enough. So um, at that point, I was sort of thrown into a, as I call it, a midlife crisis as like a 15 or 16-year old, because I started at Tams when I was 15. And I was like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do now. Like my whole life, up to this point, I've been like, I'm going to be an astronaut. I'm going to do that through being an
Yeah.
astrophysicist.
You have the Goodwill Hunting poster on your bedroom wall. You're like waking up
Right.
every morning, going to Calc 2, and you're like,
Yep.
this is gonna be it.
Oh yeah. I used to wear an MIT hoodie every day of the year, summer, winter, rain or shine, for like years. I was that obsessed with it for some reason. And yeah, and so now all of a sudden it was just like, bam, life just smacked me in the face and was like, nope, figure something else out. And I was like, I literally don't know what to do with my life. I have no idea what I'm going to do, because I've always only ever thought of myself as being an astronaut. Yeah, I toyed with other ideas, like as a kid. I think I went through a phase where I want to be a paleontologist, like a lot of kids I think do. And then because I love dinosaurs, and then I went through another phase where I was like, I'm going to join the army like my dad did. My dad was a in the he's an officer in the army for 20, actually like 24 years, I think. Before he retired. And but he was a ranger, and in the earlier half of his career, he was a ranger infantry officer, and then he ended up branching out and doing some like systems administration stuff and whatnot. But so I was like, oh, maybe I'll go be a ranger or something like that. But nothing really serious. And then now I had to come to terms with, okay, like what am I going to do with my life? So I basically, asked dad, like, what should I do? He was like, I don't know, like, what do you want to do? And I was like, I don't know. One of like
You're both
Spider.
looking at each other like looking for direction.
Yeah, it's like that Spider-Man pointing at Spider-Man
Yeah.
meme. Exactly. So yeah, so yeah, that wasn't, particularly helpful. I mean, he was basically like, look, whatever you want to do, I will support you in doing. Just figure something out, and
Sounds like
I'm
a
happy
good
to.
dad.
Yeah. Oh no,
Yeah.
the best, man.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But like he wasn't like, hey, go do this, right? And then it
Yeah.
was
Well, I mean, that's also good too, right? To give like the freedom
yeah.
of choice and that's
It's the best thing I could have asked for, but at the time I just remember being like, I need something, something to grab
yeah.
onto. But what he did recommend was he was like, well, you guys have like a school or like there was we had a lady who was a psychologist, like I think a PhD level psychologist at so that specifically worked at, I don't remember if she was specific to TAMS or worked for UNT in general. But anyway, she was like a counselor or whatnot, just a general like life counselor. So I went to her because dad was like, hey, well, go talk to her. Maybe she can help you out. So I went to her. I was basically like, lady, you got to help me out. Like, I have no idea what I'm gonna do with my life. Like,
Help me.
I'm 16 years old and I'm like, I'm already gonna be like washed up, And she was like,
Yeah. My
whoa.
MIT hoodie, what do I do with it? Do I wear it? Do I not wear it?
Like I'm never getting into MIT if I can't do calculus. I was like, what do I do with my life? And she's like, whoa, dude, like pump the brakes. It's gonna be okay. Like let's take a deep breath here and figure some stuff out. So she basically asked me some, a bunch of open-ended questions about, life and what I want to do and things like that. I told her my story, and then she had me do a couple of like testing batteries, and one of them was the Myers-Briggs type indicator, and then there's a couple other ones. And one of them was like something I don't even really remember what it was like, but it was something to do with like basically like it would suggest career paths to you. And that one spit out the a list of things. Well, like one of them was like a lawyer, which I was like, nah, law didn't sound great to me. I don't really care about that. Another was I want to say engineer was one of them, and I was like, well, I clearly can't do that if I can't do calculus. So and then one of them was military officer, which was I was like, huh, well, I'd always thought about, kind of toyed with the idea of going into the military, but never really, never really was like a super serious idea. And then interestingly on the list, doctor was on there. And I just remember looking at that and kind of being like, huh, yeah, I'd never really thought about that. But at the time, so my stepdad was a Navy neurosurgeon, and he actually was the chief of Navy neurosurgery for a few years, and was actively practicing at the time. My mom was a Navy nurse, and then so I had a window into
Hmm.
medicine that I'd never really thought about or you know took any action with. And nor did either of them really push me or like proselytize in any way that hey, you go into
Yeah.
medicine, right? But I sort of remember just looking at that and being like, well, I've always liked biology and I've always liked helping people. And I mean, the kind of the cliche of I like biology, I want to help people, right? And I was like, huh, I never really thought about being a doctor, but that would be pretty cool, right? Like maybe I should learn more about this. Um, so I went back to my dad and, I told him, and he was like, sounds good. Yeah, talk to your mom, talk to your stepdad. So I reached out to them and I was like, hey, can I come like shadow you on some surgeries or something? And my stepdad was like, absolutely, not a problem. I can get you in with some of my colleagues as well, like no problem at all. So the next time I went to visit them, I ended up, yeah, shadowing my stepdad on a couple of surgeries, which were really cool. But the one that stuck with me the most was he had me shadow one of his colleagues who did a left temporal lobectomy on an epileptic patient, and that was freaking sweet. It was so interesting. It's about a 9 or 10 hour surgery, I think, but I got to go in and see. I mean, basically from the start where they, opened up the scalp and then drilled holes into the skull and then cut a big plate out of the skull and pulled it
Yeah.
off and then lady's brain right there. And I just remember like staring at this lady's brain and being like, that's a human brain, a living human brain inside a human head. This is wild. Like
And
it
they
was
can
just like
see it.
right? I was just like, it was, you know,
Yeah.
it was so cool. And yeah, so and then just seeing how they took this like horseshoe electrode thing with a bunch of these like sticks poked
Hmm.
through it with little balls on the ends of the little electrodes, and they put that over the opening, and then they put those little electrodes in different spots on the brain, and they woke her up at that point, and they would run currents through those different electrodes and have her count or talk or do other things, so that they could map out her speech areas of her brain, so they didn't cut those out. And they just got the epileptic epicenter, and that was again just like a
Yeah.
mind-blowing thing. Just like I can't
So
believe
you're
people.
hooked now. You were like, oh, medicine,
Oh
you're
yeah,
hooked. And
it was like a freaking fish hook snagged me, man. I was like, this is so cool. I want to do this. So then I was like, I want to be a neurosurgeon. Um, so so anyway, but yeah, I was like, okay, well, I want to do medicine, like for sure, definitely want to do this. And so then I set about trying to go do medicine, and so that was probably when I was about 16 or so. So it wasn't until then that I had any inkling of like
mhm.
I want to do medicine, and even then
And
it wasn't like.
when did the space and the medicine come together? Like when did that happen?
So that's a little bit later. And so because up to that point, I never thought about connecting space with medicine. I didn't think about like, oh, I can be an astronaut by being a doctor,
Yeah.
a physician. Um, and um, so next, what happened was I was like, okay, I'm going to go to med school, and go be a nurse. And so yeah, so I let's see, let me think back in my memory files here for a minute. So yeah, finished TAMS. So I went to Texas A&M from TAMS, and specifically because they had a biomedical sciences program, which is basically pre-med, but that's what they called it. And I heard so part of TAMS too. So you do your 2 years, and then you can either stay at UNT to finish out the rest of your time. UNT being University of North Texas in Denton, or you can go to transfer to any other school that you get accepted to. Um, and so when time came for me to apply to other institutions, I basically was like, I just want to go to Texas A&M because to be honest, I was a little bit lazy and I don't want to do like 15 applications or what are 50 applications or something. My dad was kind of like, you should go to Rice or you should try for like an Ivy League. And I was like, dude, with my GPA, like I think I had like a I don't know, think it was a 3.5 by the end of things, but so not bad. But like I was like, nope, no Ivy League school is gonna mess with me. There's nothing special about me, and I certainly don't have like stellar, perfect grades or anything like that. So I didn't write my own book or do make my own podcast or anything like that. So um, yeah, so I
Didn't
was like,
record
no.
on a Zoom, man. Nothing, not rocket science.
Yeah, dude. Hey, I'm impressed by it. So, but yeah, so I was like, nah, I just want to go. I want to go to med school. And of course, there's sort of two schools of thought on that, right? One is go do pre-med so you get as prepared as possible for med school, even understanding that you're not only going to get so prepared, like it's gonna med school for a reason, right? And then the other school of thought is go do something, whatever you want to do before you go to med school, because they'll take any degree and you'll be a better rounded applicant, things like
Yeah.
that. I weighed on both of those, but at the end of the day, I was like, I don't really know what I would get a degree in otherwise. And I should backtrack for a moment. There was a period in my like midlife crisis period at 16 where I was like, I'm gonna go do computer programming and program video games instead. And then I did a couple of computer science classes. The first one I loved, and then once I got to data structures, it was like, hey, so you need calculus for this, and I was like, damn it. And then also at that point, I pretty rapidly realized that like talking to computers was infuriating, and I didn't really want to do it as a job. So, um, but I bring that up because considered, okay, well, do I want to go try, reattack this again and get a computer science degree? And I was like, nope. And there was no other degrees that I really was like that interested in. I thought about language for a little bit too, because I always loved languages and I'm relatively good at them. But then I was kind of like, well, like, what's the point of getting a language degree? I was like, it just made more sense to me in my mind to go do as close to med school as I could
Mhm.
to prepare me for med school and whatnot. And I like biology anyway, so I was like, yeah, biomedical
And you were
sciences
hooked
sounds
on that neurosurgery. You were hooked.
absolutely, man. I wanted to cut brains, man. And so yeah, yeah. So yeah, I applied to Texas A&M. Actually that was the only school I applied to. I was like, I don't want to bother with the rest of them. I just wanted to go to that biomedical sciences program. And it was it's a good program. And I if I could go back and do it all over again, and this is any Aggies listening, I'm so sorry, but I would actually go back and probably do a language degree at UT Austin.
Yeah, I was about to say, you about to say what you're not supposed to say.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm gonna probably get crucified by any Aggies listening.
You're hanging up
I'm,
your gig 'em and you're turning into hook 'em. Like that's
yeah,
not like that isn't you
I'm a
can't do that, man. That's like
I'm
it's
a
against
traitor.
the I don't
I
like
know I'm a
you're
traitor.
from Dallas, right? You're gonna explode, dude. Like don't say that and don't think it. Like don't.
Well, maybe you can edit it out, I guess. But yeah, it's I have to admit I can't lie about that. But I think going back, that probably would have made more sense for me. But as it is, I didn't, and so it is what it is. But I still really enjoyed the program down there. And another reason I went to A&M, to be honest, was a lot of my friends from TAMS were going to A&M for various things, and so I was like, okay, well, I want to go be with my friends because I don't want to have to go make a bunch of new friends with college students whom I'm in some cases quite a bit younger than. And so there's a number of factors. Also, my girlfriend at the time was going to go to Rice, and so A&M was
A little
relatively close. Like,
closer. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
It's funny how that
Um,
works. Like little things happen like that and you're like changes the
yep.
whole
Oh yeah, it all gets amalgamated into the calculation there, and so, but yeah, I mean, again, like it was a really good program. One of the highlights of the program that actually drew me a lot too was I think that was one of the only programs, the only like pre-med programs essentially anywhere in Texas that had a cadaver lab with real cadavers. There were dog cadavers, but they were real cadavers because A&M has a vet school. Um, Actually, a very good vet school. Anyway, so yeah, so I went to A&M, did biomedical sciences. Since I had, 2 years of college credit, I basically did um, 2 years. I'm trying to think now. I don't quite remember why. I ended up graduating in winter of 2010, instead of oh yeah, so I guess that would have been Okay, that's why, because I did summer classes anyway. So I graduated slightly early, I guess, about a year and a half at A&M. But
Mhm.
um, yeah, it was good. And then applied med school, applied to all the med schools in Texas. When I did the MCAT, and that was another kind of funny saga. Um,
Can I pause
so
you just for 1 second? Did
yeah,
you run into any space med as an undergrad, like during your year and a half? It's kind of a short period, but I know A&M has quite a big space med, aerospace, bioastronautics presence, at least now, and um, they do have quite a bit of space med stuff there. So did you run into that then or anything like that?
well they do now, but I don't think they did at the time. They do. So A&M does have one of the best aeronautical engineering, aerospace engineering programs in the country. I think at the time that I went, it was number two in the country, I think. And actually, one of my friends was doing aerospace engineering at first before he dropped out of that and went to something else. And so there was definitely a big aerospace presence on the campus, but it was not. It was as far as I was aware, it was solely engineering. There
Hmm.
were, I think, some people doing some research because A&M is a huge research school. There were some people doing some research via the vet school, but it was never something that got brought up to me. And
Yeah.
never something I had really thought about digging into, unfortunately. So most of my time at A&M, I was not particularly
Yeah, it seems
space.
like the paths are still separate at this point.
Yeah, yeah, and the reason I'm elaborating a little bit on A&M is just to kind of make the point to anybody listening that you know life's kind of weird like that. It's hard to
Yeah.
predict the way that things are going to go. Um, and so, yeah, so I ended up studying for the MCAT with my girlfriend over the summer, and we took it at the same time. And I got like a 38, and she got like a 30, I think a 30 or 32, which we were both shocked by. I mean, she was like legit, like, how did you get a 38? Like, I should have beaten you, Like, and I was like, yeah, of the two of us, I think you are the smarter one. So I was like, I don't know how this worked out. Truly,
Yeah.
it was kind of baffling to me. I honestly thought maybe still kind of think there might have been a clerical error somewhere. I was like, there's no way I got that good of a grade on the MCAT. So after that, I was kind of haughty and I was like, well, I'm kind of a big deal now. So I just like walk into any med school. I can walk into Harvard Med School and just be like, hey guys, I got a 38 on the
Yeah,
MCAT.
look at
When can I?
this. Look at this.
Yep. And
This is
so
what you
I
wanted. I finally have something that you want.
That's right. Exactly. I was like, now I'm in the big leagues, baby. And so I applied to like, I don't know how many med schools across the country. I applied to all the Ivy Leagues. I applied to a bunch of other med schools, just all across the country. And then I applied to all the schools in Texas just because they're in Texas. And I knew that like, well, if all else fails, I'll get one of those in Texas because Texas is super friendly to Texas residents for med school. Um, and then when all was said and done, I got I think two interviews outside of the state of Texas. One was Johns Hopkins, which I did not get an offer when I went there. That was an interesting experience. I've never been to Baltimore as an adult before that point, and we actually had a student get chased back onto the campus by people trying to steal his wallet. Not to
Yeah.
say that like, Baltimore is a terrible place. I ended up doing my intern year there. It's got challenges like any city, but that was, me, suburban white kid from Texas. I was like, holy cow, this place is crazy. Anyways, but I didn't super vibe with Hopkins anyway. They seemed kind of a little stuck up. And so I was kind of like, well, if they offer me, I'll probably go because it's a good name, but like I wasn't super excited about it. The place I really wanted to go was UT Southwestern. That was like my number one A because it was a
It's
phenomenal
the Harvard
school.
of Texas, I think, right? In
I
medicine.
mean,
Yeah.
pretty much. Yeah, exactly. And like they do awesome work. And two, because it was close to my dad, who lived in the Keller, so closer to Fort Worth, but 45-minute drive away. So that's where I wanted to go. And also because when I interviewed there, I was really impressed. Like they did a really good job doing interviews, and like I felt actually valued as a prospective applicant, and I didn't feel like they had, despite the reputation of being kind of a cutthroat gunner school. I didn't really get any sense of that from when I interviewed versus when I was at Hopkins and I kind of just, it felt like it was kind of oozing from the walls. Um, and so anyway, so my number two was UT Houston because it was also a good school. Houston has TMC, which is awesome, and obviously the Space Center's down there, so they do work with space. So there was some degree of like, okay, I should be somewhere close to space, just because
So
it's,
it was the connection's getting closer now.
it's getting starting to get closer,
Yeah,
right?
but you still did
But I
you know what that space medicine existed at this point? Like that you could be a physician that took care of pilots and astronauts. Did you know at that point?
No, I did not.
Okay.
However, there was a couple of neurons fired that were like, well, if I'm down there close to the Space Center, maybe I can do some work with the Space Center somehow,
Yeah.
Um, I can be a neurosurgeon for astronauts maybe or something, but not just as like tangentially, not like
Yeah,
as
yeah.
a like
Not like discrete defined.
right. Mm. So, anyway, when the match came out, I matched to UT Houston, and I was pissed. I was like, "You have to be kidding me!" Because I felt like I did a really good interview at UT Southwestern. Um, the other thing was that once I got my MCAT, I should back up from it. Once I got my MCAT score, I decided, okay, well, I'm gonna go to med school. I gotta pay for med school somehow, and I don't want to owe a bunch of money. So I was like, there's precious few options of how to do that. My parents basically told me, we'll get you a bachelor's degree, and then after that, the rest is up to you, man. Good luck. And I was like, okay, that's fair. I mean,
Yep.
completely reasonable. So I was like, how do I do this without owing somebody a lot of money? And basically your options are you're either going to owe somebody money or you're going to owe somebody time. And so I ended up deciding, well, you know what? I always wanted to be in the military anyway, because my whole family's military. And I was like, I'll do a military scholarship to med school. And so all you need for that is you need your MCAT score, and then you can apply to the program. And I think above a 34 or something at the time, which again, I know that for anybody listening,
Those scores
who's
like don't
taking,
work anymore. They
yeah,
don't. I took in the
this
old system too, so
right, this is ancient history. Okay, so yeah, but
yeah.
this is ancient history to most people who are applying now or recently. Scores are totally different now, but above a certain score, they basically just gave you an automatic pass and like, yep, you're in if you want it. So my score was high enough to get an automatic you're in. Like they didn't even make me do a bunch of the like questions and stuff where you have to write like, why do I want to be in the military, et cetera. The recruiter's just like, yep, all right, well, let's put you in boots. And so I signed up for the Health Professions Scholarship Program, which, again, like phenomenal program, I think, for anybody out there who does not want to owe money and would rather owe time.
And is
It's
this, sorry to interrupt, is this the
Mhm.
HPSP
Yes,
scholarship? Okay, so
this is the
that's an
HBS.
acronym, Health Sciences Professional Scholarship, I believe.
Yeah,
I don't
Health
remember
Professions
the
Scholarship
exact name,
Program. Yeah, Health
but yeah, go
Professions
on.
Scholarship. There's another one that the Navy has called the HSCP, the Health Services Commissioning Program or something like that, where it's a little structured a little different. You owe more time in the back end, but you get paid as an active duty person throughout school. So you make more money in med school, but you owe more time in the back end. That's only through the Navy. I considered that for a little bit. I was kind of going back and forth between the Navy and well, originally I was thinking I'll join the Army and because like my dad, right? And I
Yeah,
was like,
yeah, you
oh,
had the
maybe
Ranger, Army, and then you
yeah,
had the Navy nurse and the Navy neurosurgeon, and then you're just like, screw that, I
yep.
want to go do Air Force. I mean, it's the same story with the A&M Texas thing. It's the same thing.
Well, yeah, a little bit. So,
You're just a
so fun,
turncoat.
I know, man. That's right. That's right. Just me, Benedict Arnold over here. Um, Actually, funny story on that. So when I was trying to figure out which branch I was going to apply for, I was like, well, I'll probably do Army because my dad was in the Army, and like I want to, I think it would be cool if I could do Ranger stuff or like Special Forces kind of stuff for a while or something like that. And then my mom and stepdad were of course like, oh, you should go Navy, you should go Navy, it's awesome. And then so I told my dad, I thought about it for a while and I was like, I'm just like not super wild about boats and stuff. I don't really like relish the idea of being stuck on a ship for, 6 to 9 months at a time, et cetera. And I didn't
Some
really
good
even think about
insight. I think that's a lot of the a lot of the
it.
experience.
Yeah, it certainly is from what I've seen. So, but yeah, I was like, I don't want to do that, and I didn't really think about the naval aviation side of things. Somehow, Top Gun didn't come to mind. And so I was like, yeah, I don't know about the Navy. I'm just stick with the Army. And so I told my dad. one day I was like, "Hey, Dad, so I think I'm gonna do the HPSP, and I'm gonna take the Army HPSP." And I figured he'd be like, "Oh, wow, that's a great choice. I'm really proud of you, whatever." And there's just like dead silence for like 5 or 6 seconds on the phone because I'd given him a phone call. And
Yeah.
at the end of it, he just goes, "That's the dumbest shit I've ever heard in my life. You will not join the Army." He's like, "I did 20 plus years in the Army, so you didn't have to." And I was like, jaw dropped, like, "What? That's not what I was
Wow.
expecting." And he was like, "Dude," he's like, "I'm telling you, I mean, nothing against the Army, but he was like, dude, I'm telling you," he's like, "I think you would be much better off in the Navy or the Air Force. They have better quality of life, better bases, better, just a lot of stuff much more up your alley." Um, and he's like, "If you like space stuff, then like the Navy and the Air Force both have a heavy space presence, believe it or not. I mean, obviously the Air Force did at the time. No, we didn't have Space Force. And the Navy does a lot of space stuff too. The Army dabbles in it, but for the most part, it's Air Force and Navy. So I was kind of like, "Oh yeah, okay, well, that's a fair point." I was like, "All right, well, again, I was like, not really big. I'm not really wild about ships, so I'm like, I guess I'll do the Air Force then." And I mean, and to be fair, so I got my private pilot's license when I was like 17 or 18, because I really loved. I grew up flying with my dad. He was a pilot as well, or a civilian pilot and flight instructor. And so like some of my earliest memories are like standing in between his legs in his little Beechcraft Sierra with my like eyes just over the dashboard, and then him pointing out, "See that water tower over there? Fly us towards that." And I would take the
Mhm.
yoke and fly us over towards the water tower.
Nope, nope, straight and level, straight and level.
Yep. Yep.
That
Exactly.
is such a
Exactly.
cute picture, man. That is like, I would want that for like my future kids. That's like that's amazing.
I gotta say, man, like general aviation is fantastic, and I think it's one of the things we're really lucky about here in the U.S. that it's so relatively general aviation friendly for people who aren't, gazillionaires, because the rest of the world it's pretty expensive. Not that it's not cheap in the U.S., but or that it's cheap in the U.S. It's not, but yeah, but like having that experience growing up was really phenomenal, and absolutely like highly recommend if if you can give your kids that kind of
Yeah.
experience. It's really magical. And so, but yeah, I was like, like Air Force makes a lot of sense for me actually, because I really love aviation and whatnot. Like, I'd love to be a part of that. So, and it's closer to space and whatnot. Sorry. So yeah, so I was like, cool. All right, join the Air Force. So I did the Air Force HPSP, and that was that. Still hadn't really come to the awareness of space medicine or aerospace medicine or anything
Mhm.
like that. And so
This is
finally
just
getting
going
into
to show that like the journey is such a meandering thing, and you don't have to know
Mhm.
the end. You just got to just make the next best step, and you can end up doing something completely, that you know and love, and now you're in this incredible role, and you had no idea like main a lot of the way through.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of what I want to illustrate by belaboring this kind of, like I said, pinball kind of journey. That like I had no idea what I was going to be doing for most of it, to be honest.
Yeah.
So, so I get into med school, or I get into UT Houston, and I'm like, all right, whatever. Like, it's not a bad school. It's not UT Southwestern. I was pretty pissed. I knew a friend who got into UT Southwestern with a significantly lower MCAT score than I. I think he had like a 28. And he got in, and I didn't. I got waitlisted. I should say I got waitlisted. And I was pissed. I was like, how did like he get in? And to be fair, like dude's awesome, great guy. I think he's an ER doc now. And so nothing against him. Like he absolutely should have gotten in. But at the time I was pretty salty. And so I relegated my, or, kind of just like, okay, yeah, I'll go to UT Houston. I'll make the best of it. It's not a bad thing at all, right? Like UT Houston's a great school. Um, anyway, so I go down, like start looking at apartments, and then I end up getting like contacted, and then they're like, "Hey, some rich people want to give you like $10,000 to go to UT Houston's like some scholarship or whatever." And I was like, "Okay, sweet, like I'll take that."
Where
Um,
That's
yeah,
amazing. It's like a
I
bank error
love,
in your favor. You're playing
I
Monopoly.
know, right?
Yeah.
Collect $200, right? Yeah, so I was like, okay, maybe UT Houston won't be so bad after all. And then like it was like May or something, so really close to the time that you got to go, start orientation and everything. And my dad and his my stepmom at the time, who and I were all out at like Universal Studios or something, and I get an email on my phone because I think I had a smartphone at that point, and I look at it and it's UT Southwestern saying, "Hey, you're waitlisted. We'd like to offer you a position because we've had somebody drop out. Do you want to go to UT Southwestern?" And I was just like, "Holy shit, Dad! Like this is amazing." Also, sorry, I try not to curse on air here, but
No, it's okay. It's all
I
good.
forget sometimes.
Yeah.
But I was like, holy cow, Dad, this is amazing. Like I got into UT Southwestern, like the wait list, actually paid off in this case. And he was like, are you going to go? And I was like, yes, absolutely. So I told him, I wrote him back and I was like, yep, absolutely want to go there. So I had to cancel the scholarship at UT Houston. And I was like, thank goodness I didn't sign for an apartment. And instead I went to UT Southwestern. Another thing, so kind of fast forward a little bit through my med school time at UT Southwestern, I will say it's not as gunner as the reputation made it out to be. Like I was told before I went there that like people were, like ripping pages out of books in the library so that people couldn't study and stuff like that. Never saw anything like that. Nobody was gunner. There were gunner people from the standpoint of like people that were really, really smart and really, really driven and like were absolutely going to do the best they possibly could to make the highest grades they could. But nobody was backstabbing anybody else. We did have we had some interesting people, I'll put it that way, in our class, and definitely had our share of scandals, if you will. But the bottom line was it was a great school. I did not do a very good job as a medical student the first couple of years. So my first year, I busted my tail trying to get the best grades I possibly could because I went in there and I was like, okay, this is it. This is like major leagues now. I got to be on my game. Like I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna make all A's. Gonna get a 4.0. Go be a neurosurgeon and figure out how to get to space somehow. Um, and then I got through first year making mostly A's, a few B's. But I was like drained by the end of it. And I was just like, this is unsustainable. Like I cannot keep this up. Everything's getting harder. And then second year was widely told to us is like this is going to be the most difficult year because it was the way they had the schedule at the time. I don't know if it's that way now, but it's just they had like it was like 13 blocks that were a month long, and basically you had 3 weeks of, and it was you had pathophysiology, like I guess it was like cell biology, pharmacology, pathophys, and I guess physiology. So they teach you, what the normal function was, how it went wrong, what drugs to use to fix it, and then you look at it under a microscope and see how it all looks and like is actually put together. And so you just have those four classes, and then they would have a test, and it was things are separated by systems, So some tests would be like renal plus pulmonology or whatever, something like that. Those two actually weren't combined, but anyway, the point being that so it was 13 blocks back to back. It was 3 weeks of uh, instruction, and then you took the test, and you had basically the rest of that week to kind of like decompress and then get ready for the next block. And I started off like the first 3 or 4 blocks, did all right, got B's, and then I was just like, dude, I cannot keep up. Like it was just truly drinking through a fire hose, and I was like, I don't know how I can do it. And then at the same time, what didn't help was my dad was going through a particularly nasty time with his marriage at that time. Um, Not air his dirty laundry, but he's been married 5 times and divorced 5 times. That was number five. And he and she did well. He he really busted his tail to do everything he could for the relationship, and we still to this day don't really know what her deal was. She was from China, and was very nice at first, and then got over here, and then became very mean. And she would like like hit my dad, stuff like that. So it was not good. And so finally, after like 5 or 6 years, they ended up getting divorced. He's been much happier ever since. But at the time, I was watching him go through this both emotional and physical abuse. And I actually had lived over with him and her for the first, I lived over there for like one semester of my early med school. And like, I was like, I need to leave because like, it's too difficult to
Yeah,
deal
not a
with.
good
And so
environment. Yeah.
yeah, so that made it tough too to focus on studying, and I kind of got into a real slump. and I was positive I was going to fail out of med school, and it was all going to my dream was all going to come crashing down. I was going to be like, um, selling burritos at a gas station or something, and that wasn't what I wanted to do with my life. But anyway, somehow I got through second year of med school, and finally get to third year of med school where we started clinical rotations because it was just purely didactics the first 2 years. I think it's changed since, but um, and that was amazing. I got into clinicals and I was like, holy cow, this is exactly what I wanted to do. Like this now feels rewarding instead of just feeling like I'm getting beat on a daily basis.
Yeah.
I'm getting to actually like interact with patients and take care of people, and I like patients seem to like me well enough, and I love the patients for the most part. It was tough though because I'd gotten myself in a bit of an academic hole that I had to climb out of, and just didn't have the best general fund of knowledge. That was always what I got written up for at the end of my rotations was, needs better fund of knowledge. To be fair, I think a lot
Every
of clinicians
single medical
right down
student.
here, yeah,
Like that's
because
the catch 22. It's like you are rotating for the first time. These people have been
right,
doing their jobs for years,
yeah,
and you're it's your first time even knowing where to go in the hospital. And they're like, "Well, you
right.
don't know enough about this specialty." It's like, "Yeah, I'm literally
Opposite.
here. It's my first week." Like the
Yeah, it's like
fact
why do
that
you
they
think I'm
think that you should have this huge fund of knowledge is like kind of like how about you go to rotate through all these different things? And how about you, why are you consulting all these other services? Like I'm gonna be on that service in a month and I'm gonna have to know all
Yep.
those things.
Yep, exactly. I couldn't have said it better myself. Yeah, it was so frustrating, but understandable from my perspective, being feeling like, yeah, I really don't have a good fund of knowledge. So even compared to my peers, but managed well, pretty well through third year, and finally we come to where I got introduced to just the idea of aerospace medicine in general.
So
Um,
fourth year med school. So it took
third
all the
year.
way there. Oh, third year.
Third year med school. It was later in the year. I think it was, well, actually, I can't remember where it was in the year. It was third year at some point. And I did my family med rotation. Um, and the family med clerkship director was a former Air Force flight surgeon. I don't remember if he'd done residency through the Air Force or not, but the bottom line was, former Air Force flight surgeon, great dude. I wish I could remember his name. It's really sad that I can't remember his name. I remember his face, but at any rate, he had all of the clerks rotating with him do like a get to know you sheet where he asked a bunch of questions, and then he would kind of just do a little brief like interview of sorts, like 30 minutes or whatever in his office at the start of the rotation, just to get an idea of what your interests were, who you were, where you came from, etc. And so one of the things I put on mine was that I was in Air Force HPSP, and that I was a private pilot, civilian private pilot. And so when we got to do our little sit down, he was like, "Oh, that's super cool. So you must be going to be a flight surgeon, huh?" And it was like that, like record scratch, like jazz music stops, and I was kind of like, "I'm sorry, what?" And he was like, "Yeah, like a flight surgeon. You want to be a flight surgeon, huh?" And I was like, "What is a flight surgeon?" And he was like, "You don't know what a flight surgeon?" And I was like, no, but like I'm sure I'd heard of the term at some point in
Yeah.
my life, but never connected with me or anything. And I
Yeah.
was like, "What is a flight surgeon? Please tell me. This sounds super interesting." And he was like, "Oh, well, like you're basically a doctor that takes care of air crew, like pilots and astronauts and like blah blah." I mean, like he couldn't have sold it any better. And I was like,
Mhm.
"That's the thing you can do. You can do that." And he was like, "Yeah." He's like,
Yeah.
"There's actually space medicine specialty, you can do too if you really like it." And I was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. That's like
Yeah.
that's exactly what I want to do. I was like,
Yeah.
okay, like want to do that for sure.
Yeah.
Um, to be fair, I like probably a lot of students did every rotation I did in third year, I was like, I'm gonna do that. Like first rotation was peds, I was like, I'm gonna be a pediatrician, and then after that was surgery, and I was like, I'm gonna be a surgeon, and after that was whatever, and I was like, I'm gonna do that.
Yeah.
I got to family med, and I was immediately like, screw the rest of that. I'm gonna be a flight surgeon in the Air Force. And
Mhm.
he's like, dude, it's like that's super common thing to do in the Air Force. It's really
Yeah.
cool. I was like,
I'm
okay,
just
well,
going to
that's
interject for 1 second. I think that the whole reason I do this podcast is because it is so happenstance and it
yes,
happens, you run along some person who happens to introduce you to the field, and all of a sudden the world opens up. And
yes.
why don't more people know about all of these interesting physiological problems, these different
Mm.
types of roles you can do to support people? whether they're airmen or whether they're astronauts, whatever your specialty, you can contribute to this. And there's so much work to do and so many different roles to have. And the fact that so many people get so far down the road and never hear about it is the whole reason I do this whole thing.
Yeah, and I think it's awesome that you do. Honestly, I think any facet of aerospace medicine, or what be it space medicine, or even just like undersea medicine and stuff, I think is so far out of the general public, view that it's such a shame. Like we really have a marketing problem in this field, which sucks because there are all sorts of great people out there who I think would be super interested in doing this stuff and learning about it and being part of the community, but who maybe don't get the chance because they don't find out about it, right? And and that's one thing that I think back to a lot is like if I had never gone to UT Southwestern, if I'd gone to UT Houston instead, maybe I would have because it's close to space, Johnson Space Center, and there probably would have been something that come up. But if let's say I'd gone to I don't know like Texas Tech out in Lubbock, or I went to TCOM over in Fort Worth or anything like that, would I have encountered somebody who told me about this? My life trajectory may have been totally different. I may not have known about this. Even as an Air Force flight surgeon, I may not have ever really found out about space medicine specifically or aerospace medicine as a specialty. And, so that's one of the things that I think is kind of tragic and that we really need to do better as a community is to get that out there. So I'm really glad that you're doing this sort of thing. And I hope that folks out there listen to it and go, yeah, wow, that's an option. Holy cow, I want to do that. That I mean that for me it was like it was truly one of those moments of like pure unadulterated excitement and of just like it's sort of like akin to if somebody told you like no you can actually go be a superhero like that's an
Yeah,
actual
yeah,
thing
yeah,
and I'm just
yeah.
like what so so I was like okay I'm gonna do that sounds amazing. um
Everyone I've met in the field who has ever done a podcast has had that moment. Like it's something that we all share that it's like, huh, you can do that? Like yeah,
mhm.
you feel like you can do anything and it's just the world opens up. It's great.
It's so cool. Yeah, it really is truly a moment of enlightenment. I think that's kind of transcendental in a way. It's fantastic. Yeah, and so after that, I was like, okay, I'm going to be a flight surgeon. So um, I had to figure out obviously what specialty I wanted to do, and I landed on emergency medicine kind of right after that because I was like, well frankly, part of it was like I hate having to write notes, and my experiences as a medical student having to do all of the documentation, like crazy long documentation and stuff. I was like, I want to do the opposite of that because that's tiresome. Also, I was like, emergency med seems like a pretty good thing to have if you're going to be dealing with, airplanes crashing or stuff in space or whatever. So I was like, oh, I'll be an ER guy. I like procedures. I like medicine too. I can kind of do a little bit of both. And at the time it felt like okay, like quick fix to a problem, or if you can't fix it, send somebody to someone who can, and that appealed to me at the time. So I decided, okay, I'll do emergency medicine, but I'll go be a flight surgeon because this guy had told me, yeah, yeah, like being a flight surgeon is not a medical specialty, like you have to pick a specialty, right?
Yeah.
So a little bit, or he also told me though, you don't have to pick a specialty right up front. He was like, you can be what's called a general medical officer, was a non-residency trained physician in the military. You can't do that forever, but he was like, yeah, you can do that for a while, and then while you figure out what specialty you want to do. So I was kind of like, well, I want to do residency, so I'll do emergency med. And then I got through all the way up until like the point where you apply for residencies, which I guess is in beginning of fourth year or something. I can't remember exactly. And I was gonna apply for ER, and then at the very last minute, it was something that was just like I don't know exactly what it was, but like my gut was just like, do you really want to commit yourself to this like career, specialty path? Like maybe not. So I was like, all right, well. And part of that too is I really had enjoyed my internal medicine rotation which was at the very end of third year. Um, and fun fact, I was at Presbyterian about 2 or 3 months before the Ebola patient showed up there. So dodged a
Oh
bullet
wow,
there.
yeah.
But yeah, anyway, I'd really enjoyed internal medicine other than having to write the really long notes.
Yeah, if
So
you're
I was
talking about note writing and you don't want to do that, then
The only people that make longer notes than your average like internal med folks, I feel like, are infectious disease guys. And like all you
Yeah,
ID people out there, like good on you because those are some of the most immaculate notes I've ever read. They're fantastic, but like I just can't do that and keep
yeah.
my sanity. It's too much. But yeah, so I was like, I'm gonna hold off on emergency med for a bit. I'm just gonna go in as a GMO flight surgeon, a general medical officer flight surgeon in the Air Force, and kind of test the waters a bit, go do some real world stuff for a little bit and see how I like it, and then figure out, where how I'm gonna proceed from there. Um, and so still at that time, so I was thinking, okay, starting the neurons are starting to fire. Like I can connect this to space somehow, right? Like I know I can if I can be a flight surgeon, if I can be a doctor for fighter pilots, which is what I wanted to do. And I was like, well, that sounds cool, right? But if I could be a doctor for pilots for air crew, I could be a doctor for astronauts. But I was like, I don't know how I can get there, but I know that there's a path somewhere in there, right? Um, and so basically, I called the Air Force up. I called my handlers up and was like, "Hey, I don't plan to go to residency right off the bat. I just want to go to I want to go be a GMO flight surgeon." And they were like, "Okay, that sounds great." A little
And I
down.
think they were excited because they have a lot of those open positions, and they can like just kind of explain the dynamic for the non-military folks. And I'm non-military, so any
Yeah,
extra
yeah, yeah.
details good.
Absolutely. So, generally speaking, most people who do HPSP want to go to residency pretty much as soon as they can after they do med school, right? It makes a lot of sense. Most people, I think, or many people, I should say, I probably shouldn't say most, but many people, I think, want to do the straight, you go med school, you go residency, then you do your 4 years of payback time, and you get out, and then you go off and start your career as a civilian doc, right? Um, so generally speaking, people don't sign up to be GMOs right off the bat. Like most people, I would venture to say, don't tell the Air Force, "Hey, I want to be a GMO doc." Like usually, what happens is they apply for a residency spot. They don't match because the military may not have enough, or particularly the Air Force doesn't have a ton of residency spots, which is one of the unfortunate parts of the Air Force Medical Service. We're just small compared to the Army and the Navy. So a lot of times people won't match, and then they will if they don't match to in the military match or in the civilian match if they're well. Let me back up for a moment. So there's two matches if you're a military person, right? There's a civilian match and the military match. The military match comes earlier, comes in December, November, December timeframe. The civilian match is like in March, right? So um, the military does that for a reason because they want to have first pass at you before they let you go off to do civilian stuff. So in order to go be in a civilian residency, you have to be granted permission from the military to go do that because they still own you, right?
Hmm.
Um, and so a lot of people will apply for a civilian deferred spot uh, for any particular specialty they want to do. And what that means is that the military will cut you loose to the civilian institution. They don't pay for you at all. Like you basically are inactive at that point. Still part of the military, but you're inactive, so they don't ask anything of you. They don't pay you. They don't do anything for you or with you. You just do whatever your academic training is, and then when
Hmm.
you finish, you come back and then you activate in the military. Because they're not doing anything for you, you don't incur extra time, payback time. So it's popular for a lot of folks to a lot of people want to do that because they fundamentally want to get to the civilian life at the end of things, and they're using the military as a means to an end, which is totally fine. But again, a lot of people will apply for that, like say a civilian deferred anesthesia position. They don't get it picked up, and then the military goes, "Cool. Well, since you didn't get picked up, then you're going to go be a GMO flight doc or a GMO regular general
Hmm.
medical officer." Um,
So they were super
and
jazzed that you wanted to go do this like straight out of the gate.
Yeah, so the bottom line is basically nobody really asks to do what I asked to do, and they were, and in that it's an easy solution to a problem that they have, which is certainly for at least as long as I've been in, they've never had enough general medical officer flight surgeons. They've always been low manned because people don't stay in that position, right? They do that for a few years, 1 to 4 years, and then they go to residency, and then they move on with their life, right? So And here I was asking to go do that.
Yeah.
And I don't want to go to residency. I want to do this thing. And so they were like, yeah, easy, obvious, yes. Okay, no problem. Um, so what they do at that point is they send you what we call the dream sheet. And the dream sheets, like they're like, hey, put what bases you want to be at. And they give you up to 20 choices, like 20 blanks. And you fill this sheet up with, here's the places I want to go in rank order. And of course, now I'm like, well, I don't know anything about any of these bases, so I got to go do some research. The guy who was my clerkship director back in med school told me if you want to fly a lot as a flight surgeon, the best thing you can do is go to a base with a big FTU. And FTU is a formal training unit. And what that means is that's where they teach either undergraduate pilots or graduate pilots, i.e., people who are going through Air Force basic pilot training, or they finished it and are now in airframe specific training. So when you get picked up to go to pilot training in the Air Force, you go to UPT first, undergraduate pilot training, to learn how to fly in general, right? And you learn on
You do like glider
T6s and
training, right, first, and then you
not
upgrade.
glider training. That's at the academy, the Air Force
Oh, okay.
Academy. They gliders, yeah. But in the for active duty, they do. There's an initial part called I think IFS, initial flight screening or something like that, where you fly in civilian airplanes. I think Diamond DA-40s or something for a few months, just to give you the basics of like here's how an airplane works,
It's a nice
whatever.
airplane. So,
It is a nice airplane. Yeah, honestly, I'm like,
like
man,
glass
that's
cockpit, way different
nope.
than, yeah, that's
Sounds
nice.
great. Yeah, great airplane from what I hear. I've never flown one, sadly, but yeah. And so after that, then you go to UPT, and in UPT you start flying T6s, and those are turboprop two-seater airplanes with ejection seats. Um, and so that's how you learn how to fly, basically like the basics of Air Force aviation, essentially. So how you fly, the way the Air Force wants you to fly. And then if you do well enough, they will offer you to go to T-38s, which is the jet trainer, and potentially track towards fighters or fast mover bombers like the B-1 or
Mhm.
B-2, right?
And the
And
T-38 is the same, the Talon, the same astronaut trainer, right? Same one.
yep, it's the same one that NASA has. Actually, NASA's probably are a little bit nicer than the Air Force's, to be honest,
Yeah.
because they've upgraded the avionics. I don't know. At this point, the Air Force probably has upgraded the avionics too, but NASA, I think, might keep theirs a little bit nicer than the Air Force does, just because they have a smaller number. They can afford a little bit more TLC on,
Hmm.
on the jets. But yeah, so you do the T-38, and then if you do well enough there, then and depending on the needs of the Air Force, then that sets you up to on drop night when they tell everybody, hey, here's the airframe you're going to. Then you might get a fighter or a bomber, depending on what you want. And so um, anyway, so a formal training unit is either one of the T6 units or like one of the units that does the airframe specific training, like for F-16s or F-15s or something like that. And because they're training units and they're constantly rotating students through, they have a lot of two-seat aircraft because an F-16 and an F-15, well, the older F-15s are both designed to be single seat aircraft. They had two-seat models produced for primarily for instruction purposes, right? So you have somebody in the
Hmm.
back who knows what you're doing, so you don't kill yourself
Yeah.
in the plane while you figure out how to fly it. Well, with the advent of high fidelity simulators, we don't really need that capability anymore for the most part. And so as a result, those two-seat airframes are starting to be phased out. We've seen that with the F-35, the F-22. There's no such thing as a two-seat F-35 or a two-seat F-22. So if
That's
you go to
really cool.
yeah,
Like
so if you
so
go to one of the
confident in the simulation that it's like, yeah, we'll just strap you in.
oh, they're pretty incredible. Yeah, I mean, you really do feel like you're in the jet. It's pretty awesome. So minus the G's, of course, but yeah, so if you go to an F-35 or an F-22 unit, you don't get to fly with those guys in at least in those jets because there's no room for you. They can't strap you to a pylon either, right? So you just have to if you can fly with T-38s or some other unit that flies nearby, then you do that. But whereas if you're in an F-16 unit or an F-15 unit, you can actually sit in the back seat and go fly with the pilots, and that's a huge deal. So for many reasons, obviously. So this guy was like, if you want to fly as a flight surgeon, go to a place with a big formal training unit so you can get all the back seat rides you want. And so At the time, I was in a relationship with
You gotta
sounds
stop
ridiculous.
doing this relationship stuff, man.
I'm telling you, man. Yeah, it's dangerous. It's dangerous. Well, at the time, I was in a relationship with this Romanian opera singer who lived in Germany, and I
Ah,
promised.
yes. I think this is one of the first things that
Yeah,
when we met, you're
yeah.
like, I heard that and I was like, oh man, this is a story. We don't have to
Yep.
go into all that detail. That's for
No,
if you
no,
ever
no.
catch
Yeah, we won't.
a beer with Alex, you can hear that story.
Exactly. Happy to tell it. But yeah, I won't go into all that detail here. But so because she was in Germany and I wanted to get over there at the time, I was like, okay, I really want to get stationed in Germany. So I put all the Europe or as close to Germany as possible. So I put all the European bases first. And then after that, I was like, well, I've got 15 more, 16 more slots, to fill up. So I was like, okay, like what else am I going to put if I don't get those bases? So then I was like, well, I want to fly. That's the flying fighters. That's the next big thing. So I was like, I guess I'll put all the bases of the big formal training unit that does fighter training. So I put all the F-15, F-16 bases, and then some of the I think F-22, F-35 stuff. Even though I knew I wouldn't be flying, but I figured, oh, it'll still be cool, right? And then after that, I still had like another, I don't know, handful. So I put some more random stuff. Well, one of the bases that I put on the list was Holloman Air Force Base, which is in southern New Mexico. It's basically if you like go straight north into the desert from El Paso, about an hour and a half. It's there.
So
It's
near
right
like
next.
Alamogordo and
Yes, yeah,
like
it is
yeah,
right
I did
next door
a
to
driving
Alamogordo.
trip there through there once, and there was like a
Oh,
missile
did you?
range. I
Yeah,
saw
White Sands Missile
there's like
Range.
a monument to the first chimp in space ham, like the
Yep,
first
yep,
medical experiments that were ever done in space were
yep,
done on a
and
chimp, and they have some thing.
yeah.
Yeah, it's
And
beautiful.
Ham actually stands for Holloman Aerospace Medicine. Interestingly enough, because Ham.
Wow, I did not know that. That's super cool.
Yeah. So they actually still have the monkey enclosures there at Holloman. Supposedly, I don't know if this is just a legend or not. Supposedly, they still have monkeys there, and that like because they can't get rid of them, so they're just keeping them until they all pass away. I guess I
Wait,
don't
so you
know.
were there? Did you end up there or no?
So yeah, so I put Holloman and I put Holloman as like I don't know number 12 or something on my list or whatever. But unbeknownst to me, there's basically like three bases that if you put them on your list anywhere, because what they don't tell you either is that if you put a base on your list, you are volunteering to go to that base.
Hmm.
Well, I just thought you had to fill up the list, otherwise they could send you where they want. Fundamentally, they can still send you wherever they want, but if you put a base on the list, you are volunteering to go to that base. And so there's three bases that I know of that if you put it on the list, you're pretty much guaranteed to go. And that is Minot because nobody wants to go there, Holloman because nobody wants to go there, and Cannon because nobody wants to go there, right?
And where are
Cannon is up.
those? Where are those two?
So,
Oh,
so Minot is up in the middle of nowhere in North Dakota.
okay.
And I don't even remember what it's Minot, North Dakota, right? And so it's a missile field where they have nuclear missiles and stuff. And they also have B-52s there. It's widely considered one of the worst spots in the Air Force. So I have met some people that liked it there, but you have to be you have to have some special um, characteristics, I guess, to really enjoy that kind of area.
Uh,
Cannon is in northern New Mexico, in Clovis, which is kind of out in the middle of nowhere, northeastern New Mexico. Uh, there's a large cattle farming area there, so it always smells like cow poop, and it's just a very remote base, and there's so
did you
it's a
feel at home, with the Texas A&M, the ag school? Like, did that like bring back, what did that brought back some good memories?
well, so to be honest, like I didn't know what I was getting into by putting Holloman. I guarantee
Yeah.
you they saw that and they were like, send this guy to Holloman. He volunteered because there's always issues getting people to go to Holloman. Honestly, I don't understand it. Holloman's great. It's fantastic. Alamogordo as a town is kind of crappy, but it's getting better. But dude, the area around Holloman is incredible. Truly one of the most beautiful areas of the planet
Yeah.
I've ever been.
I went camping
Um,
at Lincoln National Forest and
yes,
just up the
Lincoln.
hill
Yep.
and man, that was like there's like
Oh,
beautiful
it's amazing.
aspens. It's like this oasis up those mountains and man, that was so
Yep.
beautiful.
The number of yeah, the fact that you can go from desert basin, which has its own beauty, to alpine mountain like valleys and stuff in 30 to 45 minutes from Holloman is absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
Um, that area of New Mexico is fabulously beautiful, and I highly recommend it. Honestly, Holloman's a really cool base with a lot of really cool stuff going on too. It's just such a great area. So I really actually really loved it. I didn't understand why people were so miserable there. I think a lot of people, well, a lot of particularly the enlisted who have less choice about when they can leave a base, get stuck at Holloman for a long time, and so they get tired of it. Or you get a lot of young airmen too who show up to their first assignment, and there's no like bars or clubs to speak of, and they're kind of like, well, what do I do? Like, there's nothing to do here, because they're
Hmm.
not super outdoorsy. So I think it's one of those bases where if you can embrace the outdoors and you can find a community, you can have a really good time there. If you're really into more like city living type stuff and like, um, there's no culture to speak of out there, right? Like it's not like there's the closest thing you can get to culture is going down to El Paso and catching a concert or something, right? So it's a little challenging. And if you're a young airman and you don't have a car, well, now you're really screwed because you can't get around out there without a car. Um, so I can see where people wouldn't like it, but I loved it. It was fantastic. I got lucky, so I show up they tell me, "Hey, you're going to Holloman." I was disappointed I wasn't going to Europe, but I was like, "Whatever, it's a big fighter FTU. I'm gonna go fly fighters all the time." And that's what I did. I showed up there. I got lucky enough to be the last person to be squadron assigned. So there's two kinds of flight surgeons in the military. There are medical group owned flight surgeons, and there's squadron owned flight surgeons. We call SMEs or squadron medical element. Um, a SME actually refers to this actual like manning construct in the squadron. It's supposed to be one flight surgeon and two independent duty medical technicians, which is the Air Force version of a Navy corpsman essentially. Um, and so they're basically medical techs who have some degree of independence in what they can do, some prescribing and some basic diagnosis and triage and things like that based off of like algorithms that they have and whatnot. But they're usually they're fantastic people for the most part, very smart people who kind of get in a way a little bit shafted because they generally they're merging the career fields with paramedics now, but for a long time as an IDMT, you weren't required to be a paramedic, so most of the time you didn't go do that. And so what you get out of the military, not having any actual um, marketable uh,
Clinical
certification that
skill.
you
Yeah.
yeah, well, I mean, you have clinical skill, but you don't have any marketable certification, which sucks.
Oh, okay.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
I
So,
got
so
you.
now, at least if they're merging the fields with paramedics and you've got something marketable that you can get out with potentially. Anyway, all that is to say, so when I say going forward a SME, I'm referring to like actually the SME flight doc, the squadron owned flight surgeon. And so, anyway, I got put in the last guy to ever fill that billet, that spot. And so the entire formal training unit there was at the time it was a tenant unit, meaning it didn't actually belong to the base it was at. It belonged to a Luke Air Force Base out in Phoenix area, and but it was sitting there at Holloman, and there were three squadrons at the time, two squadrons when I got there. One was in the middle of standing up, meaning they were building the squadron from scratch. And then there was an operations support squadron, which had a lot of pilots in it. And then there was the group staff, the fighter group itself, um, which is the next level up from a squadron. The staff, a number of the staff were pilots as well. And so I got put in. So the entire group itself only had one flight surgeon spot attached to one of the squadrons. So in an ideal world, each of the squadrons, at least each of the three fighter squadrons, the training squadrons themselves, should have had their own flight surgeon and their two IDMTs. As it was, they only had the manning for a single flight surgeon and two IDMTs across the whole group. And so that's quite a scope. That's quite a large scope for a squadron assigned flight surgeon to take care of. And this was my first assignment, so I didn't
First
know anything
rodeo.
about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the nice part about it was I really got to I got to fly all the time. I mean, I was always in a back seat because there were like 5 or 6 lines a day where there was two-seat jets flying, and I'd have my pick of the what I wanted to do. And each of the squadrons would be in a different training phase, and so one squadron would be doing dogfighting, basic dogfighting. Another squadron would be doing advanced dogfighting, and the third one would be doing ground attack or something, right? Like tactical, or they'd either be doing like tactical intercept, or they'd be doing surface attack or something like that. So I could be like, today I'm not really feeling like pulling a lot of G's. I'm going to go do tactical intercept, which is
Yeah,
where
you're like, I did
you
that yesterday. I'm tired.
yeah, exactly, exactly. So yeah, so you start off the week doing high aspect BFM, which is dogfighting. And high aspect means the planes are coming head on at each other like that, and then they turn in and then sort of do a death spiral, and it's really cool. But a lot of G's. It's the probably the most physically strenuous um, type of training slash mission type that you can do. And so, anyway, but I could do that. And then the next day I could go out and fly tactical intercept, which is where you basically shoot simulated missiles at people that you can't see, that are in the air, 30 miles away or whatever, and then, it's much lower G, and, and then, take a break for a day and then go back and do another dogfighting, whatever.
Yeah.
It was great. It was awesome. I got to fly all the time. We got
That's
to see
quite the
all the.
difference from starting an emergency medicine residency and then, weeks or
Mhm.
months afterwards, like you look back and you're like you could have just been an ER doc and now you're in the back seat of all these jets and that's crazy.
Yep, absolutely. So it was incredible. There's also a lot of test stuff that goes out there, which was cool. I could see like a bomb penetrator test on a rocket sled, which was really neat. Anyway, a lot of neat stuff at Holloman. Loved it. So after a year at Holloman doing this stuff, I was like, okay, this is awesome. I think but I need to go to residency, and I think I finally decided like I'm going to go do ER residency. And this is kind of a long saga that I will bridge because for time, but basically the really long story short, I didn't get picked up for emergency med residency, but something happened that really pissed me off at the Air Force, and I was like, well, the bottom line is I got selected at first for emergency med residency, and then they pulled it back and said, actually, we made a mistake. We oversold our program. We can't give you a spot. And then so then
That's so
um,
frustrating. Oh my
yeah,
God.
it was incredibly frustrating. And then so I got really, really salty after that. And I was like, you know what, screw this organization. Like, I've been doing good work for them for this whole year, and they're gonna do this to me. So I got really frustrated, and I decided, you know what, I'm gonna get out. I'm gonna do my four and get out, go do a civilian residency in emergency medicine, and the heck with these guys. So then at that point, I was like, okay, so what stuff is left in the Air Force that I want to do that I you can't really do it on the outside. And I was like, well, I wanted to go to Korea or Japan, or Germany, but as it was at the time, the only options I really had, the easy options that I had were Korea and Japan. And all the pilots there were telling me, dude, go to Korea. It's so much fun. It's a blast. Korea it's a whole nother world. So I was like, okay. So I decided to put in I volunteered to go to Kunsan Air Base, which is um, a little fighter base in southwestern Korea. Um, that was always billed as the last bastion of the fighter pilot, which there's a lot of it's a very work hard, play hard environment. I'll put it that way. And so I was like, it sounds good to me. I want to do that. So I volunteered to do that, with the understanding that I was going to go to Spangdahlem, Germany, which is a small fighter base in Western Germany, after as a follow-on assignment. Typically, because Kunsan or some other places are remote assignments, they will give you a guarantee that you're going to go to a follow-on assignment of your choice afterwards if they have the slots for it. And it worked out that they had the slot for it after a year for me to go to Spangdahlem. So I went to Kunsan, had a pretty good time for the most part. There was a bump there as well that, again, long story that I'll tell anybody who wants to know over a beer, but that also made me really upset with the Air Force. And so I was kind of like, all right, like, I'm gonna do my time here, go to Germany for a couple years and then get out, whatever. And then I ended up on a TDY, a temporary assignment, meaning like you're still owned by your normal base, but you're away for anywhere between a few days to, like 6 months, right? Um, so I went on a temporary assignment with my squadron to Red Flag, Alaska, which is a big war game exercise thing. up in Alaska. They also do it's famously held in Vegas at Nellis Air Force Base, the original Red Flag, but they do one up in Alaska too. And so I went with my squadron, the 35th Fighter Squadron, which is not related to the medical group I'm currently in, interestingly enough. And so I went there with them, and the chief of flight doc, chief of aerospace medicine, the chief flight doc there at Eielson at the time was this great guy. I think he's now the state air surgeon for Arkansas. Really good guy named Sniper. His call sign was Sniper. Last name was Ramage. Um, and he sat down with me and chatted with me a bit. And he was like, "Oh, tell me your story. Like, what are you planning, for the rest of your life or whatever?" And I told him basically, like, screw the Air Force. And he was like, "Whoa, dude, like, let's talk this out a bit. Like, what happened?" I told him my story, and over about 2 hours, he kind of like reeled me back in. It was like, okay, like, yeah, you got done dirty a bit, but like, hey, like, let's reconsider here. And he made some really great points. One of them being like, hey, if you and all the other good people leave, who's going to be there to shepherd the new flight docs in, right? Like, think of the guys, the senior flight docs you've worked with already, and like
Hmm.
how they've helped. Wouldn't you want to be that for some other person? And I was kind of like, well, yeah, but like I'm still mad at the Air Force. And he was like, yeah, well, I get it. A lot of people are for a lot of
What do I
reasons,
do with
but
these feelings?
right, exactly. Like, but I feel this way. So anyway, he did a really good job of talking me down off the ledge, and I'm so glad that he did because that probably more than anything, in a way, saved me from not in being involved in space med or aerospace med, and allowed me to do that. Um, so he kept me from leaving the Air Force. So I'm really eternally grateful to him for that. After that point, I was like, okay, I'm gonna stay in. I'm gonna go to Germany because that was where I wanted to go next. And my plan was to be the fighter squadron doc for the 480th Fighter Squadron at Germany at Spangdahlem, Germany. However, what happened was I was supposed to get the squadron doc spot coming out of Kunsan, but the guy who was in the spot got married and extended for a year. And so I show up and they're like, "Yeah, sorry, dude, you got to go to the medical group instead." And I was like, "What? You got to be kidding me." Anyway, I made a deal with with my commander at the time, the Air Medical Squadron commander, to if I did a good work for him for the year, he would get me moved over to the fighter squadron slot as soon as it became open. And he did, and I did, and he did. And so I got to do that. And then COVID hit, which was and I got plenty of crazy stories from that time that I can tell anybody who's interested too. But as far as space medicine goes, so this particular guy, the guy that I worked for, the first year at Spangdahlem, funny enough, is also now my boss as the 35th Medical Group Commander here at Misawa. Fantastic guy, call signs Cuffs. It really couldn't ask for a better leader, great guy, takes great care of his people. Really, really awesome guy. I think he's going to probably end up being a general someday here, and for good reason. Like he's the kind of guy you want up there. At any rate, he was a big influence on me too, because when I first activated back at Holloman, the guy who I was the chief flight surgeon there, I told him like I want to do the aerospace medicine residency, the RAM, through the Air Force because I'd heard about that at the time. I heard about that back when I was doing like flight doc school, which is about 3 months of training that you do at the beginning of your time before you go be a flight doctor, so you know how to
Hmm.
general aerospace medicine stuff. And they mentioned, oh yeah, you can do this as a specialty, and I was like, that's freaking cool. If I'm not going to do emergency med, I want to do that, right? So I told this guy, he was like, "Ooh, don't do that." I did that a few years back. It's bad program. Don't do it. Like you'll get dumber in
Was it a
that program.
specific program or like what was the?
Yeah, it was specifically the Air Force program. And to
Okay.
be fair, at the time, there was some validity to that. I won't air the Air Force's dirty laundry on air here, but the program had some serious challenges and problems that have since been rectified for the most part. But at the time, he was like, "Don't do it. It's a bad move. Do anything but that. Like, or if you're gonna do it, go do like internal med first, and then go do that." So I was like, okay, maybe I'll do ER and then go do that, right?
Hmm.
Anyway, so I get to Spangdahlem and I start working for this guy, and it turns out he's a newly graduated RAM. He just went through the program, and I mentioned to him, I'd been interested in this program, but I'm not interested anymore. because he kind of brought her up at one point. I was like, hey, you seem really into aviation and aerospace stuff. Like, you might want to do this. And I was like, no, no, I heard it's a bad program. And he's like, well, let's talk about that. So he kind of sat me down at one point and we chatted about it. And he told me, yeah, the program had a lot of problems, just as recent as a few years ago, but they've kind of rebooted it and it's much better now. And so he kind of walked me through his schedule through the 2 years that he did, and whatnot, and kind of the options and the possibilities and all the stuff that he got to do. And like part of it was like, he mentioned, oh yeah, you get to do a week at NASA, and I was like, I'm sorry, what? That's amazing. So anyway, he basically did an awesome job of selling me on the program, and he pretty much told me, okay, look, so I was toying with this the whole time that I was there, the first year when I was working for him. Then when I moved over to the fighter squadron, um, as the year started to go along, I was like, okay, I got to figure out my next move. Am I really going to get out of the Air Force? No, I don't want to do that. I don't know where to go next, though, right? I don't know what my next step is. I could potentially do another SME gig but I just promoted to major at the time, and I was like, at a certain point, the Air Force is going to make you go do residency. Like, you can't just be a non-residency trained dude for 20 years and just like,
Mhm.
SME life. Like, that's just not how it works, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it. So I was like, at some point, I gotta, because some people are like, I just want to be a captain and a SME for the rest of my entire career. And other people are like, no, I want to go do other things, and that's totally both are valid. But the Air Force has things in mind and they want you moving up or out, right? And so I knew at some point I had to go do residency. And this guy, Cuffs was like, you gotta, if you gotta go do residency and you want to do residency, like, I highly recommend the Ram. And I was kind of like, well, isn't that a bad move as a primary residency? And he was like, no, it is a primary residency, and like, if you like it that much, you should go do it. And so I was like,
I
all
didn't
right,
know you
well,
could do it as a primary. That's news to me. And I guess
you
just to
can.
back up a little bit, so this is the aerospace medicine residency RAM. So being an Air Force RAM, which is a 2-year program out of Wright-Patterson, right?
Yes,
And
correct.
you do multiple different rotations, one including one at NASA. But can you kind of just talk a little bit about brass tacks of the program and just the structure of it, just very briefly?
Yeah, so yeah, granted, understanding it does change from year to year. I think it's mostly stayed pretty similar in structure, but basically, the Air Force RAM is 2 years, like you said. It is it is not what I would call a traditional residency in the sense that it's very, um, it's not hospital based, right? You do clinical time during the 2 years, but for the most part, you do a lot of away rotations in your second year in particular. So first year is primarily done when you have to get your master's of public health during the program, and so typically they do that in the first year. And so historically, there's been the ability to go do your MPH at another institution, be it like Harvard or Yale or Emory or something like that, for your first year, and then you come back and you do 1 year at Wright Pat, well, at Wright Pat, but you
Yeah.
do your base Wright Pat, right? And they have to basically condense a lot of this stuff. So that you can make all your requirements for the boards and whatnot, and still get what they want out of you. But a lot of there's also the other option. There was the other option to do a master's in public health at Wright State University, which is just down the road from Wright Pat, and that's what all but one of my classmates and I decided to do, just because it gave you more time for more like aerospace stuff. And so basically, first year you do a lot more, a little bit like didactic type stuff, and while you're also doing your MPH, basically night classes essentially. And then you graduate from the MPH program in like August of your basically, like, yeah, at the end of your first year essentially. And then you start doing a lot of away rotations at that point for your second year. So I was gone probably about half of my second year, maybe even more. I didn't spend a whole lot of time at Wright Pat, which is great for some people, frustrating for others. For somebody who doesn't have like wife and kids like me, not a big deal. For other people with families, it was a little challenging. But yeah, and so you rotate through things like while you're there at the program, you rotate through. Um, NASA was obviously a rotation that we did. I got to go to Virgin Galactic and spend a week with Virgin Galactic. I got to see a launch of theirs, which was incredible. So big shout out
That
and
that
thanks.
took you back to New Mexico, right? Because
Yeah, to Las Cruces, right down
yeah,
the road
yeah.
from home. Yeah, it was a nice feeling. But yeah, so yeah, I got to do a rotation with them. I went back and of course did the NASA clerkship, the one month NASA clerkship, which is not an option generally afforded to Air Force Rams because of they don't want to give you a whole month. It's pretty tight schedule. But my leadership at the time, the program director was willing to do it because I was really adamant, like I want to go back to NASA. The 1 week that I spent there was amazing. I was like, I want to go back. I want to do more. I want to do more space medicine. Um, and he was like, okay, that's fair.
And I'm
Like
so happy you did.
me too, man, because we wouldn't have met otherwise. And to be fair, I did have to take a week out of that time to go do an FAA rotation, which kind of sucked. But thanks to Amy, didn't miss too much, hopefully from that. But yeah, so I got to be part of the clerkship, which was incredible. Phenomenal group of people. Any of you out there listening, like, go do the NASA Aerospace Medicine clerkship. It's a phenomenal experience. Can't.
Amy will hopefully be the next guest, hopefully.
Oh, amazing. Yeah,
Because she
that's gonna
like
be awesome.
gotta tell people about the clerkship, that's her
Yes.
lifeblood. So gotta get her on.
Absolutely. You couldn't get a better person to talk about the courtship because that is her baby for sure. So, but yeah, I got to do some rotations at I got to go see the Air Logistics Center at Tinker Air Force Base in Oklahoma City, which is where they bring a lot of the heavier airplanes back to. So every so often, an airplane has to be brought back to what they call depot, and then they literally strip the entire plane apart and rebuild it. It's really incredible what they
With
do.
new parts or like
Sometimes they refurbish the old parts and slap them back in. It depends on what they got, what the technical orders specify. Um, but this is a massive, massive complex with tons and tons of people, mostly civilian, in fact, who are doing incredible work. Like we had a guy who his whole job was polishing engine fan blades. And he'd been doing it for like 30 or 40 years and like was the master at it, right? And you don't think about a person doing that per se. Like you think, oh yeah, surely they plug it into some machine and then the machine does it. No, like it's actually a person that does at least part of that process. Pretty incredible. And they
mhm.
have teams of folks that like I said, strip the entire plane down. And like they start with the paint and everything, and they strip the whole plane apart, and then they rebuild the whole thing pretty much, and then make sure it all works, and then send it back to where it came from, or to wherever the Air Force wants it to go. And so there's a lot of industrial and occupational hazards at that place, as one can imagine. Fun fact: they have the world's largest electron microscope there. Didn't know that. It's for doing what they call non-destructive inspection, so where they can check for cracks in metals and things like that,
Mhm.
but without having to break the metal down or something like that. Anyway, super cool. Got to go deal with that for about a month. It's yeah, neat place. And then I got to go to Patrick Space Force Base in the eastern coast of Florida near Cape Canaveral. Spend a week there, and I actually got to see, I think was it Crew 6 that got to see him scream in overhead from space as they splashed down. The reason I was there was Detachment 3 is lives there, and they are the Air Force contingent of the Human Spaceflight Support Program for the DoD. Unbeknownst to a lot of people, the DoD actually has a very large part in recovery of astronauts after they splash down. Often it's NASA or SpaceX who kind of actually do the hands-on stuff, but the DoD is always on standby in case there's emergencies where they need to go respond to, get astronauts out of a bad situation, or if they've had
So
some kind of
so
health
like more
issue.
like
Yeah,
fast boats or like more like helicopter
they have some.
support. Like what does it look like?
Yeah, so they have C-17s as well that they can let, and they have like fast boats. You're right. They've got parajumper, PJs that are specially trained to go do this. astronaut recovery and whatnot. And so they will station all of those assets nearby to wherever the splashdown is going to be located, and be ready to go at a moment's notice if NASA or SpaceX or whoever else calls them in as part of a DoD support function, then they will come in and do whatever they need to do to get the space crew safely, back to definitive medical care. Um, a really cool mission. So every space mission, they're always plugged in and like listening to see and watching to see if they need to do anything or they need to posture for, ooh, things are looking bad, we better start spinning people up, etc. And so actually for the Crew 6 reentry, that's what I was there for. And I was there in their little command center and stuff, and like we were watching the, and listening to all the stuff going on. And getting ready if we needed to. It felt fortunately it was very nominal reentry, but we were ready to go if we needed to move out and collect people. But yes, there are helicopter assets as part of that. There's C-17s, so big cargo airplanes that move a lot of the like larger stuff around, and then they have these fast boat packages that have like a boat and all the other medical stuff you might need, and like it's really really pretty impressive setup. Neat program, very neat unit, and so I got to go down and spend a week with them, which was super cool. Maybe it was two. I can't even remember now, but it was awesome. It flew by. It seemed
Yeah.
like it was so quick. Um, got to go to Europe for a month to Ramstein Air Base in Germany to shadow actually the guy who is currently my boss and formerly my boss, Cuffs, when he was the chief of aerospace medicine for the U.S. Air Force's Europe Major Command, which was super cool as well from a more military aspect. Yeah, just a number of really neat opportunities. One of my peers got to go to the Air Force Safety Center and do a bunch of aeromedical, aerospace safety training, which was neat. Actually, she works there now as the flight surgeon for the Air Force Safety Center. Um, where else did we go? Man, we went a lot of
I
places.
guess it just goes to show you how many different roles there are even within flight surgery. You're not just
Yeah.
taking care of a squadron or, at NASA. Like there's all these different roles you just listed off, like kind of off the cuff.
Yeah. Well, and that's if to anybody listening, that's one of the cool things about being a flight surgeon in the Air Force in particular. Navy flight surgeons have some cool stuff too, and the Army is a little bit more restricted. But I mean, as an Air Force flight surgeon, you can support fighter operations, you can support bomber operations. Bomber operations, well, and even in fighter operations, there's you can support F-16s, F-22s, F-35s, F-15s. We got the new EXs, right? The Strike Eagles that are have a lot more capabilities than the previous. So, and each of those airframes have a different mission profile and different things that they do, right? You can support for bombers, you can support B-52s is like the old school, like, bomb truck kind of like they fly really long hours at high altitudes and, can, and it can be pretty grueling. You got the B-2s doing their stealth stuff for also very long hours. And then B-1s have a totally different mission profile. They're very fast moving kind of jets.
Hmm.
And then you've got all the heavies. You've got the refuelers, the tankers that they do totally different mission set. You've got cargo aircraft, the C-5, C-17s, and then there are smaller platforms too. Like there's special forces, the special operation, Air Force special operations guys do. They have these like flying routers that are like that will orbit over a battle space or near a battle space and provide connectivity to all sorts of different systems. They have guys doing insertion, like clandestine insertion and exfiltration, where they take a special operations team and they land a little high performance airplane, somewhere where we may or may not supposed to be, and then drop off a team or pick a team up and then fly out, like all kinds of cool stuff. And you as a flight surgeon can be a part of most of those missions very intimately, which is really incredible. One of the neat things too is that you can, if you want, you can hop from different to different worlds, and then there's also the space support, right? Because NASA does really all the manned space flight stuff. The Air Force doesn't have a manned space flight program, nor does the Space Force right now. Although I know, like for example, Neil Manon is, I think, Space Force now. I think they
Yep.
moved him over to the Space Force. But generally speaking, like Space Force isn't out like putting people into space, right? That's what NASA is doing. So
Yeah.
you can be a DoD, you can be an Air Force officer, astronaut, working basically working for NASA, but employed but owned by the Air Force, or in some cases the Space Force, is with like a Neil Manon, for example. But you can be a part of all those things. There's also the Air Force liaison flight surgeons down at JSC, the Johnson Space Center. There used to only be one spot for that, but they just funded two more, so now there's three spots for that. So that's something you can do if you really like space and space medicine. In fact, I would argue that's probably one of the best that's one of the best positions you could get in the Air Force, I think. It would be an incredible opportunity to basically work as a NASA flight surgeon, but be in the Air Force. So really, really cool. And then there's the what they call the chief of bioastronautics, which is the medical lead for that Det-3 that I mentioned that does the
Mhm.
human flight support, which is a really neat opportunity as well. You can be a flight surgeon in any of our space bases where they do launches like Vandenberg, or they don't do launches, places like Schriever Air Force Base where they control the GPS constellation. And as a flight surgeon, you get to be a part of those missions in, like I said, a very intimate way. You get to be the air crew's medical belly button, right? And then you're the primary care provider for all of those air crew or space crew, whatever you want to call them. And as part of that, you are not only just encouraged, but required to learn their mission and understand it very well so that you can provide the best care possible. And that's so you know that a fighter pilot with a broken right finger or right index finger is a big problem because now he can't pull the trigger. Or a fighter pilot with a broken right thumb can't, or actually either thumb broken, big problem, can't control the aircraft
Mhm.
properly. Right? And so in um, an ordinary job, yeah, okay, unless you're a concert pianist, a broken finger might not really stop you. But for air crew or for space crew, that's a kind of a deal breaker, and so they have to be down for the until they're healed up enough to be able to fully use that digit, right? So those are the type of things that that, and then a lot of the human performance, like the um, fatigue management and things like that are huge as well. So,
Mhm.
yeah. So to anybody out there who's listening, there's so much you can do as a flight surgeon. It can scratch almost any kind of itch, and there's a lot of cool paths that you can take that will also set you up for paths, in the civilian world when you get out, doing space and aerospace type stuff too. So,
Yeah, I have two pointed questions. So, in
yeah.
studying for the STEP exams, whenever aerospace medicine's brought up, like you have some aerospace medicine worker who's been working on some factory line, and the answer is always berylliosis, right?
Yep.
So, have you ever seen it?
No, I've not seen Berlioz. I'm trying to think. I've seen probably the most occupational thing I've seen has been isocyanate induced asthma. I saw a bit of that at Tinker, but so actually, interestingly enough, Berlioz is issues with like chromium, hexavalent chromium and stuff. They're vanishingly rare these days because of all the OSHA standards that are put into place to protect people. So that's one thing. Like even a lot of the occupational docs that I talk to, who are specifically OcMed docs at Tinker and at Lackland was another place that I went and did some time with the occupational medicine folks there. They'd said that they hadn't seen a case in 20 years or so, just because it's so
Yeah.
rare. So no, I haven't seen any really kind of cool, if you want to call it that. It sounds terrible to say, but I haven't seen any cool occupational illnesses
Hmm.
from like yeah, Berliosis or anything like that. So
Second pointed question. Have you ever seen? So I did I looked at a lot of the aerospace medicine board's review material for a paper that I've written that hopefully will be published soon, relatively soon. But I came across a term called aviator's astragalus, which is like a talus fracture for like
yeah.
essentially hitting the rudders. Like, have you ever
Yep.
seen that, or can you talk about that? Or
I haven't seen that. So that is a specifically very, well, I shouldn't say common, but that is almost universally a helicopter injury, as I understand, because of the way helicopters crash and the way the helicopter pilots are sitting. Typically, apparently, from what I've heard slash read, it's It's typically seen in deceased individuals who've been through a helicopter crash.
Ah, okay.
Um, but
Autopsy
yeah, so
finding.
yeah, so it's not usually something that you'll find in an active aviator, unless they've had a bad crash but managed to walk away, which is possible, but with
I don't
helicopters,
think you're
not very.
walking away on that kind of fracture.
Yeah, well, yeah, great point. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, on the way perhaps, but I will say probably some of the more interesting aviation related injuries that I've ever seen. Well, maybe not interesting isn't the right word, but um, so I've seen a few. So like one of the things that you see not uncommonly in aviators who ejected via an ejection seat is wedge fractures, like compression fractures in the
Of the
spine.
spine, yeah.
And so I've seen a couple guys who were either former or current fighter pilots who had an ejection in their past who had some degree of compression fracture that had healed. They had a waiver for it, and they were okay, but like obviously had been shortened a little bit and probably going to have some lovely degenerate or disc degeneration, issues later on in life. But um, yeah, no, I haven't seen any talar fractures from
Yeah.
crash.
It's
But
just like two of the things that pop out. Obviously, they're like the zebras.
yeah,
But I know that I have a friend of mine who's currently at Walter Reed doing internal medicine, is in the Navy, and he just wanted to kind of know like what does your day to day look like? Like what's the kind of like the run of the mill stuff that you're doing? Like what are you doing tomorrow? Like what's your Monday look like? That kind of thing.
Yeah, so for everybody listening, so I currently occupy a position that's called the Chief of Aerospace Medicine. It's much more impressive sounding than it actually is, but basically I'm the senior most flight surgeon on the base, with the exception of actually my boss, who's a flight surgeon, but his job is not to be a flight surgeon. His job is to be the commander of the medical group, the hospital on base, if you will. Um, and so, as the senior most flight surgeon, the chief flight surgeon is what we kind of say day to day. Well, actually, we say SGP. It's an acronym that doesn't really mean anything, but that's if I say SGP inadvertently, that's what I'm referring to is this position of chief of aerospace medicine. So, as that job, I am not nearly as clinically oriented as I used to be. I'm much more of an administrator, policy level kind of person. And like I like to say I'm kind of a consigliere for the med group. I help liaison the med group and the
Might have lost you.
as a squadron flight surgeon. My day.
There you
Oh,
caught
can you?
up. Sorry, my bad. I think my
Oh,
internet
sorry. Yeah,
hiccuped.
yeah, cut out. Well, anyway, what I was saying, I don't know if what you caught there, but I'm the as a chief flight surgeon, I do a lot of more like administrative and policy type stuff, and oversight of the actual flight, like the flight surgeons, the junior flight surgeons under me, versus as a squadron flight surgeon, my day would look very, very different. So I'll kind of walk you through both. Um, so as a squadron flight surgeon, my day typically, usually you have to do about 2 days a week of clinic. So I would be in clinic one day, and clinic day is pretty normal. As one would imagine, you just see a bunch of people in clinic, right? Nothing's like
So
particularly
what are
stellar.
the things that you're managing? What are your common complaints? Like preventative care? Are you talking about like diabetes, hypertension kind of stuff? Or are you talking about
Yes.
like talk through some of is it normal medicine or is it somehow different?
So I would say it's not really normal medicine in a way, or well, let me put it this way. So most aircrew are selected, or most aircrew have a higher medical standard to get to, right? To be
Yeah.
aircrew, like so you can't have diabetes really and be aircrew. There are some cases of people
Yeah,
who've been
recent
waivers.
changes for type 1
Yep, especially in
diabetes.
the FAA side.
Yeah.
Yeah, but in the Air Force, hard to be a diabetic aviator. You really can't do
Yep.
that unless yeah, it's
You
very,
just
very
get you could
uncommon.
become incapacitated. It makes sense. Like unless you
Yep.
have continuous glucose monitoring, all that kind of stuff.
Right, exactly. So there are some things that the Air Force, the FAA actually leans a little bit ahead of things these days, I think, over the Air Force, but that kind of makes sense given what the Air Force does. But at any rate, So to answer your question, typically you're seeing healthier folks who are healthier than the average bear. And so most of the complaints that you tend to see as a flight surgeon are going to be things like musculoskeletal complaints is probably number one. Back pain is probably one of the biggest ones, and neck pain as well. And then also dermatologic stuff, because a lot of times people will get like stuff and they're like, I don't know what this is. Do you know what it is? And you look at it and it's like, oh, this is some derm stuff, whatever.
Those are the
Um,
top
so
two in astronauts for all the listeners out there, by the way.
Yep. And so it's
MSK and Derm. Yeah.
yep, it's the same, and it's the same in amongst non-astronaut aviators in the Air Force for sure. So those are the probably the biggest ones. So if you if you like those things, you'll see a lot of them. There's also so we do have preventive health that's kind of built into the military. For aviators, we see them once a year face to face and do just a basic kind of head to foot checkup. We don't draw labs as a matter of course until people hit certain age points. But if it comes up during the visit, somebody's like, "Hey, I've been feeling really tired lately, and like whatnot. I feel a little dizzy when I walk upstairs or something." And you might be like, well, let's get a CBC and make sure you're not anemic or something like that,
Mhm.
right?" So we do those sort of things. So there is a lot of preventive health care, but yeah, when you're seeing people for acute stuff, it's typically MSK or derm. I would say there's not insignificant number of folks that come in for maybe like neuro type stuff too, like oh, like I get my hands or feet get a little tingly at times, something like that, which may or may not be actually a neurologic manifestation of something. Um, so as flight surgeons, historically, we've seen aircrew and their family members, but the way the Defense Health Agency is changing our military health systems, the way it works, we as flight surgeons typically no longer see dependents, meaning the non-active duty members, which is really kind of a shame because those were some of the people where you get your real, what I would call real medicine, right? Like, I can think of a dependent I saw at Spangdahlem who had basically had gallstones, who had been going to the docs for a couple of years, and then apparently heads were scratched. Nobody really knew what to do. And then she, shows up to my clinic and is like, I'm having this issue, I'm having right upper quadrant pain with
We're
meals in
grabbing
particular.
a greasy hamburger.
Yeah, and I was like, "Do you have a family history of gallstones?" Well, yeah, I do. Like, well, okay, let's do an ultrasound. Get an ultrasound. Bam, she got gallstones. Get her gallbladder removed. She's fixed, right? So that was like a super satisfying. Like, this is not something you typically see in an air crew.
Hmm.
You might occasionally see an appendicitis. I've seen a couple of dudes that I've sent to, like it's Bengal. I had a guy come in who had like pretty classic appendicitis. So, Big Bernie's point was tender, et cetera. And I was like, you need to go see surgery. You need to get imaged and then go see surgery. So sure enough, he did, and he had appendicitis. They took it out. It was great. Um, you see people with fracture. Again, going back to MSK, I see people with basic fractures for stuff. Like I've seen guys who had gotten fractures by punching a wall when they were mad. I've seen guys who got fractures because they fell off a scooter when they were doing something dumb while, inebriated. I've seen stuff like that. Like I said, a lot of derm stuff, random derm things. A lot of allergies, interestingly enough, which is not generally a big deal. It's pretty easily managed for the most part. But yeah, a lot of allergies. And then every now and then you get other random stuff. So one of the things that we do as well, so as flight surgeons, is we don't just own air crew, right? Sometimes we also do all the occupational medical exams on the base as flight surgeons. And so as part of that, we will do occupational medical exams for police, the security forces, as we call them in the Air Force, military police, and also for firefighters. And so those guys they also tend to be relatively healthy, but tend to have different sets of things. So amongst the military police, there's a lot of mental health stuff that goes on. So you've got a lot of mental health with them. With the firefighters, you get a lot of weird, random stuff. But I've seen some odd things with them, like, anemias and other kind of things that you wouldn't ordinarily expect. I saw a guy once who was, when I was at Spangdahlem, who well, I don't remember exactly. I think he was a firefighter. I can't remember, but he ran like 100 some odd miles a week or something. Like, dude was like an ultra marathon fanatic, and he was literally running so much that he was breaking down his. He had hemolytic anemia essentially from
Like a
just running.
rhabdo type of thing, or
No, not even
rhabdomyosity.
rhabdo. He was just breaking down his blood cells so quickly because he was running so much. It was the weirdest thing. Is basically like exercise induced anemia. And, it was wild. I, went down through a whole anemia workup. I even considered sending him to hematologist, but like basically everything else was completely stone cold normal. And I was like, dude, I think the solution here is you just got to like ratchet back about 30% on your running. And he was like, I don't think I can do that. But so you see some weird
Yeah,
stuff
you
like
you
that.
were treating the wrong organ. You were looking at the blood, and then you really had to treat the brain.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of times it comes down to that sort of thing. So, well, one other guy I saw it was interesting back when I was at Holloman, I found a guy or I had a guy show up who had it's like a blood Chiari yeah, it was like a Chiari malformation or something like that. He came in with like constant, really bad headache for like 2 weeks straight. And I was like, this sounds suspicious. Let's get an MRI. And so we got an MRI of his head, and he had a Chiari, I think a grade 1 Chiari malformation or something like that. So it's been a while since I thought about that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I may be saying stupid things right now, but yeah. So you do see some interesting odd things. Certainly, have heard of many other wilder things. Amongst air crew. But that's the general sort of thing that you do in clinic is you do a lot of these administrative examinations, these preventive medicine and administrative things that's to certify people for their jobs. And then you do occupational exams and things like that. And then you'll also do some acute care for, again, random stuff like, oh, somebody has a muscle spasm in their low back or something like that. And you'll see them take care of them for that.
Mhm. It
Um,
seems kind of similar to like a Medicare visit or like a type of like occupational visit, where you're
yeah.
kind of doing you're like the visit is very geared towards what the organization wants to see out of it. Like you test these certain things to qualify them for disability or to maintain their Medicare status or something like that.
Yep. It very much is similar to that. It's just it's specifically for their job instead of for their like as a means testing, mechanism for welfare for an entitlement program, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, so that's accurate. We do a lot of that, and then also, like I said, provide their acute or at least if not acute care, their basic like primary medical care as well, in addition to those occupational things. It actually can be a little tricky as a flight surgeon, and that's one thing that sorry Air Force, but like I don't think the Air Force teaches us very well. Is that there are some really important facets of being an occupational medicine doc that are not at all like being a primary care doc, but you're kind of fused into both as an Air Force flight surgeon, and it
Mm.
makes things a little weird. What I mean by that is, for example, if you have an active duty member who comes in for an occupational health exam, like let's say a firefighter who comes in for their annual exam, you're not really supposed to look at any medical records or that they don't produce for you, technically speaking, is my understanding. Or another, actually, probably a better example would be, let's say you have a member who was formerly active duty. You can say maybe say they're retired now, but that now they're coming in for an occupational exam to be, I don't know, some kind of civilian worker on base, right? You're not, even though you can access as a military physician, you can access their military medical records. You're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to take whatever they give you and only reference that. You're not
Mhm.
supposed to access their medical records, technically speaking.
So kind of like a
Um,
non-holistic view in a
yeah,
kind of it's just yeah, I can see why they would want to do it that way.
well,
I
yeah,
feel.
because it's specifically an occupational medicine exam, and so you're specifically supposed to be acting as an occupational medicine doc. And in the
Hmm.
civilian world, as an occupational medicine doc, you wouldn't be privy to somebody's medical record except what they give you to satisfy the requirements for the position that they're applying for or whatever, right? So
Hmm.
you're not really supposed to go digging through somebody's record. And it really can get tricky if you have somebody who, like, for example, separates from the military, who you've provided care for up to that point. They separate from the military, apply for a job, and as their former primary care doc, things about them that might disqualify them for this position, but they're not giving you medical records that say those things. And now you've got kind of an ethical dilemma where it's like, well, I'm not supposed to know this. And technically speaking, like if I'm acting solely as an occupational med doc, I would, ordinarily not know this, but now I know this. Can I use this information or not? It's kind of tricky, and it sets up some
Sounds
weird
very
situations.
tricky.
Yeah, so and I've personally dealt with a few of those situations, and it's a little, you have to really walk a line on that. So it can be a little challenging being both an OC doc and a primary care doc under the same roof,
I
you
don't think
know.
I
So
ever would have expected that. I thought that would be like pretty complimentary, and I think that they may be that too. But seeing that like hearing about those challenges, I never would have thought of that.
yeah, it's definitely not something I ever would have thought of either before getting into this job for sure. So, but it's can be interesting. I mean, a lot of Ahmed stuff is very paperwork and bureaucracy heavy, but kind of the reason why they're doing it can be pretty interesting. And so I think occupational medicine is really fascinating in its own way. But
So I wanted to take a quick note that we are currently at like roughly 2 hours of recording. So
oh,
we're
no.
currently at way past one orbit, going on onto our second orbit. So I wanted to kind
Sorry.
of maybe shift the conversation into like, what do you want to do in space, man? Like, what are your plans? What's your future? And then we can go for however long you want. I'm happy to continue talking about this. I find it super interesting because I don't know really anything about it, and that's really why I wanted to talk to you about all these different experiences and perspectives that you have. So, kind of want to hear like, where's Space Med going to take you? Where are you going to take it? And then we can kind of wrap whenever you want.
Yeah, man, sounds good. Well, so as far as what I want to do with my life, that's a tough question to answer in a way. I still want to be an astronaut. It's still like my, my goal. I don't know how likely that is to happen, but I would say it's probably more likely now that, commercial space industry has taken off and whatnot, than it was maybe 20 years ago when that still wasn't exactly a thing. However, I would, I'd still be happy being space adjacent in some way, right? My current plan, interestingly, as I've talked about like, oh, here's all the cool stuff you can do in the Air Force. My current plan is actually to get out of the Air Force next year and go to the Air National Guard, and specifically to try to be a fighter pilot. And so part of that is the Guard has a different way. So the Guard typically hires you to an airframe versus, well, to back up for a moment, the active duty, there's not a lot of opportunities to go from medical to flying primarily. There is the pilot physician program, which is a really cool program. However, currently they're having a bit of like the headquarters level folks that control the number of slots, pilot slots that are given to the pilot physician program are currently not being very forthcoming with those slots right now for people who are docs who want to go become pilot physicians. And also specifically, pilot physicians are really more of like a developmental and safety kind of entity. They they they're fully qualified in both things, but they're maybe not net masters of either. And so their main purpose is to be a subject matter expert in the crossover between medicine, aerospace medicine, and actual aerospace operations, right?
So is that like
So
so they can provide better accident investigation stuff like that, like background, because they can have
absolutely.
kind of foot in both doors.
Yeah, exactly. And so like one good example is if you remember some years back when the F-22s were having a big issue with the oxygen systems on board, they're having a lot of issues with physiologic incidents on flights. The F-22 pilot physician, because there's usually only one to two per airframe, if even that. The F-22 pilot physician at the time was deeply involved in figuring out the root cause of those oxygen issues and figuring out the solution to it. So often that they're involved in safety type stuff and also developmental type things like when they're rolling out a new helmet with new gadgetry on it, then they might have the pilot position weigh in and be like, hey, what things from your pilot experience and your medical experience, what things are important to have in this, what capabilities or what arrangements of things are important to have, what ergonomics are important to have for this helmet, et cetera. Um, and so that was something that I was pursuing for a while, kind of up till recently, I would say. And then recently, I kind of made the decision that I think the the guard offers more stability that I kind of am looking for at this point in my life. Well, yeah, the guard offers more stability for which is what I'm kind of looking for in life, and also, um, if you get hired as a pilot for the Guard, then that is what you do. You're a pilot for the Guard, and then you can be a civilian, whatever else you want to be. And so I think that would be a good way for me to fuse being a doc, maybe on the outside, a flight surgeon for NASA, or work for Virgin Galactic or SpaceX or Axiom or one of those guys potentially as a flight surgeon or an astronaut if they'll have me. But and then also while being able to fly fighters, which is something I've really wanted to do for a long time, but I got talked out of it years ago by some folks for fair reasons. But it's always something that I've really had in the back of my mind. I've really wanted to do. Um, and and I think at this point I'm 34, gonna be 35 in October. The
Hey,
clock's
same as
ticking.
me.
Hey, hell yeah, man. I mean, it's a good age to be, but the bottom line is I'm old for a pilot applicant. So um, I figure, not old for an astronaut, but old for a pilot applicant for high performance aircraft. And so I figure if I'm going to do it, I got to do it sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
Another thing too is, to be honest, like part of it is because I do think that being an operator in a high performance aircraft will be value added in a big way to being an astronaut potentially in the future and to doing space operations, because while the realms are a little different, there's a lot of things that are very similar, right? And how missions run and things like that. So I think having that experience will, help me be a better astronaut, or at least astronaut adjacent, support provider, as well as, potentially maybe giving me a leg up on trying to actually get there. Because, I mean, I think unless you really know people, you got to stand out in some way to get to be an astronaut, whether it's via NASA or via one of the commercial entities. Um, and I've had a pretty cool career and some cool experiences, but I think on paper I don't necessarily pop, like other folks might. And so this is one way I can potentially distinguish myself as well. And also, like I said, just do something that's super cool and I've really wanted to do for a long time. Um,
I think that's
to go
right.
back, yeah,
I
so
think
to go
it's,
back.
go ahead. You got
Oh,
it.
no, I was just to go back from when I realized that I didn't quite finish talking about like day to day versus what I do now versus what I do in a clinic. I don't know if you
Yeah.
want me to finish that,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
because we kind of got to talking about what specifically you do in clinic. But like so as a squadron flight doc, I would do clinic for a couple days a week, and then the rest of my week I would either spend flying or out at the squadron, working in my office, usually like dealing with emails or whatever. But often I just kind of like walk around, chat with folks, go to the aircrew flight equipment area, see how they're doing, see how they do what they do. I talk to the pilots, see if they need anything, see if they have any kind of curbsides that they want to talk about. Sometimes do some dry needling for the pilots, which is something a lot of them like. Really helps the back and neck stiffness that they get after flights. Um, and really, a lot of it's kind of building rapport with the pilots and making sure they trust you, and then that they see you as not a threat to their wings, right? Because that's a big deal. And then also you spend time doing consultation, aeromedical consultation for the squadron commander, who's never a physician, and they're a fighter pilot, and a lot of times they'll ask like, "Hey, we're on this upcoming temporary assignment that we're all going to go do. Are there any vaccinations that we need that we don't have, or like what's the what medical requirements are there to go to this thing or something like that?" So you can consult on that, and then you kind of act as a liaison between the medical group, the base clinic slash hospital, and the squadron itself. So if pilots need something they're not getting, then you can go to the base medical group and be like, "Hey, like we need to fix this," or something like that. So you spend your time supporting, how about half your time supporting the medical group itself, and then about half your time supporting the squadron. Um, and then when you're deployed or temporary, on a temporary duty with your squadron, then you are doing deployment medicine essentially. So you're just making sure everybody's as healthy as possible. Any things that pop up, you handle. Like when I was deployed down to Thailand one time, we had a guy get bit by a monkey, so I had to arrange getting him rabies vaccinations and stuff like that. Again, numerous people with broken bones and stuff. There's limited things you can do on the road like that, so often you have to lean on the local medical establishments. But you're the liaison between your guys and those medical establishments. So, but it's really cool being part of the mission so intimately like that and being in a squadron. You also get invited to all the squadron parties and roll calls and whatnot, which are a big deal and very cool. They're very tradition laden and very special to the aircrew and whatnot. And so it's really special to be invited into that trust circle where you can be in, in there in that group and part of the part of the shenanigans. But also you have to remember that as the doc, you have to be a bit above the shenanigans so that you can help anybody who accidentally bonks their head or something like that, and potentially shut things down that might be going a bad direction. Um, so yeah, it's an interesting balancing act. But one of the proudest things, like I had or experiences that I've had in my time as a squadron flight doc is the fact that I got named a call sign. My call sign's Evil, like Doctor Evil. And being a named member of a fighter squadron or a bomber squadron is a really big deal, and in that community, and it's a really great honor to be part of that. Yeah, there's a lot I could talk about on that, but obviously we're all kind of over time already. So anyway, that's kind of on the squadron flight surgeon side of things. On the chief of aerospace medicine side of things, my typical day, like Monday, for example, tomorrow. Most of my day is going to be meetings. So I'll be in the several medical group meetings, executive staff meetings in the morning. I'll probably have to answer a bunch of emails that came in over the last couple of days, or Thursday, Friday, that I didn't get to because I was down in Tokyo, Yokota, doing a test for my pilot application. Um, but anyway, so I'll probably answer some emails, which is not terribly exciting, but a lot of the emails tend to be things like, hey, we've got this issue with this particular process, like how can we fix this? Or, hey, I need this information. Or, one of the projects I'm working on currently is getting a portable hyperbaric chamber here. So we actually got the contract done and executed. Well, it's being executed. The chamber probably won't show up until August, but so, I have to deal with questions about that sometimes. Like they'll be like, "Hey, what capabilities are you requiring for this contract to be written?" So then I have to like get with some other folks and then mind meld to make sure we're putting forth the right capabilities to contracting to then execute on the contract. I also go down and oversee the deployment health program, a lot of the public health stuff that goes on. So that's another thing too. As chief of aerospace medicine, I actually wear three hats. I'm chief of aerospace medicine or chief flight surgeon. I'm what's called the public health emergency officer, and then I'm also the installation, occupational, and environmental medical consultant. And so what that basically means is I own about 50 programs on base that have to do with public health, medical readiness, deployment health, industrial health, and things like that, as well as the overall aircrew specific stuff, processes on base. So I oversee all of those things. So because I'm a programmatic lead on most of these things, I spend a lot of my time trying to patch holes in programs or develop programs in different ways that will better meet our needs as an organization or things like that. It's sometimes rewarding, to be honest. I don't love the job. It's not really what I most want to do, which is more hands-on type stuff. Like I want to be a SME again, to be honest, a
Yeah.
squadron flight doc. I can never go back to that because of my training as a RAM. The Air Force probably won't let me. They're going to be like, you're too valuable in these programmatic oversight positions. So the only things that are really open to me anymore, aside from a few odd jobs like the NASA liaison doc jobs or chief of bioastronautics at Det 3, most of the jobs that are left to me are, staff jobs, medical command, medical squadron or group command jobs, and being chief of aerospace medicine in a different, bigger base. And so that's part of why I want to go to the Guard and pursue the pilot route as well,
Mhm.
because I realize that I want to be a hands-on guy. Like I appreciate the policy and oversight paradigm that I've gotten from the RAM, and it's very interesting in its own way. But I don't think fundamentally I'm really a bureaucratic kind of guy.
You never
Just
struck me as that, to be honest.
yeah, it's not my jam. Not my jam. So while this has been a really cool job in a lot of ways, it's just not my cup of tea, I think, in a lot of ways. And so, and some people it might be. I've met some great SGP types. Another thing too, so like that's meeting day tomorrow. So most of my day is going to be meetings and catching up on admin work. Other days of the week, I'll go fly still because I still have requirements to go fly, right? So there's a Navy twin engine turboprop aircraft here called C-12. I think it's a turboprop. Called a C-12, and so I'll go fly with the Navy C-12 guys. If when I get a chance, I'll go fly with the F-16 guys. Um, and then I also do a lot of random other stuff. I'll go out to the squadron sometimes, just hang around so that they see my face, so they get to know me a bit better, so they know who I am and what I do. I'll sometimes go to other meetings that are line side specific meetings. So like the operations group, I go to their staff meetings, for example. So they have a senior medical representative there to answer any medical questions they have that relate to operations. I get involved with the what's called the wing inspection team, which is our um, inspector general adjacent organization that sets up and executes exercises, training exercises, readiness exercises for the medical group specifically, things like that. So it's a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of admin work. I also do other things like I'm the senior reviewer for medical waivers, aeromedical waivers that we send up to the major command for disposition. So if a pilot has a disqualifying or air crew
Hmm.
has disqualifying something disqualifying, some medical thing that's disqualifying, they will we will put together a waiver package. We will evaluate and treat as we can, and then put together a waiver package to send up to the major command to say, hey, will you buy off on this risk and let this aircrew go back to flying, or do we need to modify how they can fly or what they can fly? So I'm the senior reviewer. So my flight surgeons that are junior to me will write the waivers, put them together, and they send them up to me for me to give a pass and be like, okay, this waiver needs to be rewritten, or these things need to be added, subtracted, etc. This is the wrong diagnosis, whatever. And then, or like, yep, looks good, and then send it up the chain to the major command for disposition. And then I'm the final say for duty restrictions, mobility, meaning deployment restrictions, and fitness restrictions to a degree for the base. So I deal with that as well. I will get those things pushed to me sometimes. I need to review some of those um, profiles, as we call them. And then another thing that I will do is I'm also the like senior reviewer for any deployment or the deployment, permanent change of station, or temporary duty waivers that need to be routed. Meaning, somebody gets selected for, hey, we want to move this person to Greenland, right? To Pacific Air Base in Greenland. They have to have certain medical clearance, like they have to meet certain medical requirements, have to have medical clearance. And so I'm the one who does the final review. If they have a medical condition that might disqualify them from going to that place, then we will send up a waiver to, again, the major commands to say, hey, do you want this person to go with this stuff? We think it's a good idea. We don't think it's a good idea, whatever. And so I'm the senior reviewer for that to say, yeah, you support this. No, I don't support this, et cetera, and then route that. So it's an important position, but it's not very glamorous, I guess, in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
So
yeah, but on the other hand, like I think a lot of that like waiver dynamic is there's going to be so much work that needs to be done in that arena, both for government astronauts, but especially for commercial astronauts. Those
yeah,
waivers need to be generated. What's disqualifying, what isn't. In some of the circles I've been in, there's lots of talk about all of that, and having that experience seems amazing. Just to be have some kind of authority on it or experience with it. I think whatever you do, that's going to be, well, you may not like the work. It'll bring you to a good spot in the future, I think.
yeah, here's hoping. I mean, honestly, like the waiver stuff, a lot of that stuff is doesn't bother me as much as some of the other like more bureaucratic, like kind of Air Force specific stuff. That's less about the mission and more about just Air Force bureaucracy, like having to do um, you know, having to do certain things for the medical group, just like kind of politically, if you will, and things like that. So, but yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that's actually one of the things I really enjoy is like applying standards to decide, applying standards, and also like using my brain to try and decide what makes sense, what risk
what risks make sense for us to take as an organization, right? Um, it's kind of it's an interesting challenge to try and blend like, trying to do right by the air crew and trying to protect them because it's their career, their livelihood, right? And a lot of times, especially with like fighter pilots, for example, taking their wings away, like medically, is like one of the worst things you can do to somebody, right? Um, and so we strive not to do that, or even limiting them, like saying like, oh, you can't fly more than 5 Gs, or you can't fly fighters anymore. You got to fly a heavy aircraft. Like that's like truly like heartbreaking for most people, most of these guys and gals because this is their dream, right? And they're doing their dream. They're doing their favorite thing in the world, um, and so it's an interesting challenge trying to respect that while also trying to do right by the organization, and make sure that we have that we have people who meet certain standards and qualifications in place, right? um, you know and also, sometimes the air crew, because it's their dream, and they're like, sometimes they don't want to understand, or they don't want to go along with what is truly best for them from a medical standpoint, right? And so it's a challenge sometimes too to be like, hey, like I know you want to keep doing this thing, but it will like either it will kill you, or it will wreck your body, or it will be too unsafe to your fellow, your fellow pilots or air crew, et cetera. And it can be tough to get that across. But yeah, so it's an interesting challenge that I do really enjoy. And I always try to I always try to get to yes if it's reasonable and possible, right? Like obviously, there's some things um, you can't support, but most things we're able to find a way to support if we've risk mitigated enough. So I
Yeah,
really
that's one
do
of those
love,
other fine lines between that primary care and the occupational thing that you have to
yeah.
walk.
Absolutely, absolutely. But the risk mitigation aspect of it and the risk management aspect is actually one of the most enjoyable parts of it, I think. One of the coolest parts about the RAM, I think going through the RAM really gave me a better perspective on all that, that I didn't quite have just being a squadron guy for my whole career before that, where I was just like unabashedly the air crew's advocate and not really thinking about risk too much to the organization, right? So
Hmm.
definitely a really cool
Well,
thing.
yeah,
And
it changes whether you like it or not when you put those extra hats on, you know?
it does for sure. And I think you were spot on earlier when you said that it's going to be important going forward because as we've seen, we're opening up, we as as humans are opening up space to more and more people. It's not just, a handful of highly selected, highly trained, almost perfect health government astronauts anymore. It's going to be a lot of people who have disabilities, or people who have, medical conditions that might be potentially problematic in space. And are we just, we're clearly the appetite is not there to just say, oh, well, we're just not going to send those people into space. Like there, people are pushing boundaries already, trying to send like people with diabetes and et cetera
But
into
hey, I have
space.
all this money. Come on.
Well, yeah, and money does talk. Money does talk. At the end of the day, like if you're willing to buy that risk and you're willing to waiver stuff, then I'm sure will be willing to put you up into space. But I can see a future just like we have with with a lot of the airline type stuff that goes on, right? Like where um, you're going to have people that are going to have certain medical conditions or disabilities that we will be able to mitigate risk enough to send them into space, even with type 1 diabetes with an insulin pump, for example.
Hmm.
Um, and so, and as space expands and as commercial space, it's not just going to be travel. It's going to be, I'm sure, a lot of economic activities. There are going to be things that they can't build as efficiently down here under gravity that they can up, in zero G or in free fall essentially, or on the moon or whatever. There's going to be mining for asteroid mining, whatever resources we can get from the moon or Mars, things like that. They're going to be those things in the future, and we're going to have people who have medical conditions who are not perfectly healthy who will still be interested slash needed to go do those things. And we I think we do as a species need to be able to do that, right? Like aviation is a what I would call a mature industry at this point. It's a mature. We pretty well know how aviation works. We know how Bernoulli's principle works. We know how aircraft work, and we're pretty well masters of it. I would say at this time, at least building jets and propeller aircraft. Um, we're going to get to that point in space at some point, I think, unless the civilization collapses worldwide, right? We're going to get to that point.
Knock on wood, everyone.
Right,
Let's
like
hope that doesn't
hopefully
happen.
not. Hopefully not. Don't want that to happen. But so we need to be thinking about these things. And unfortunately, a lot of people are, which is great. There's a lot of folks looking forward into the future to figure that out. But, it just even interesting things like, okay, like, you put somebody on the moon with 1/6 of Earth's gravity, and like, how's that going to affect their heart failure? Are they going to, or you put somebody on Mars with 1/3 of Earth's gravity, and is that going to, solve some of their medical problem or reduce some of their medical issues or increase them? We already know that obviously space is pretty inhospitable and zero G is a problem for the human body because it fundamentally wants to be as efficient as possible. And if there's no gravity load, then we don't need a robust heart. We don't need robust musculoskeletal system, right? And so that's going to be a challenge, going forward and how to mitigate those things. But it's going to happen at some point, right? Like it's going to
Mhm.
happen. So I think applying those that risk mitigation paradigm um, with also a robust understanding of the medical processes is really important and really cool, to be honest. So if anybody out there hasn't read the Expanse series, the first book's Leviathan Wakes, highly recommend. One of the best, and I'm not paid by James S. A. Corey, I promise, but one of the best sci-fi series I've ever read. But some of the cool things in those books is that how they talk about very realistic issues in space and how they're dealt with, right? From crash couches for high G maneuvers to the high G burns that they have to do in order to get places fast and then flip around and stop so that they don't overshoot slash slam into a planetary body, et cetera. And just the differences in physiology, like the folks who grow up in space under low to no G,
The
end up
deltas.
the Beltas,
Delta
exactly.
load.
Belta Loda, yeah. And how physiologically they're different and they literally can't survive gravity wells. I mean, those are all real issues that humanity is going to face going forward into the future. And so I think, and I just think those are such cool issues to think about and to think about what our solutions to those problems are going to be.
Yeah,
So
let's bring science fiction to science reality, and then let's also bring science reality into science fiction because that's where a lot of the cool stuff and a lot of those ideas can play around.
absolutely, absolutely, man. Yeah. So to kind of go back to maybe wrap things up and answer your question about where I'm going, fundamentally I'm not really sure, but I just know it's somewhere in space or to do with space. Whether or not I make it to space or not, I mean, I certainly hope I do, but I definitely want to be space adjacent. So whether if it's working for one of the commercial space entities, if it's working for NASA, if it's working for whoever else, I mean, I don't even know, but I would definitely like to either be a flight surgeon or operator for one of those groups, and try to do my part about helping solve some of those issues that we were just talking about. Um, I would like to obviously, really hope I get picked up for a pilot slot through the guard, but if not, probably I'm going to go be a guard flight doc for a while and see what I can do to get over into the commercial space world or government space world, depending on what's available. Um, you know, think currently that things with the economy and administration make that a little bit less a little bit more challenging now than I think it would have been in the past. But we'll see how things go in the future, and definitely, regardless of how I get there, I will, which is still not entirely clear to me, as with most things in my life up to
It
this
hasn't been
point.
this whole journey that you told me about. It's never been
Yeah,
clear. It never will be, and that's life, right?
yeah. But I think the beautiful part about that, for anybody out there who's still listening to me ramble here, is that that you don't have to have everything perfectly planned out, right? That you just have to be able you know, to recognize and steer yourself towards opportunities that present themselves. And then sometimes it is just luck, right? But like sometimes you can, a lot of times you can arrange things like, um, you know, I didn't have to come to go back to NASA, for example, and do the clerkship. I really wanted to. And so I pushed for it. And I initially was told no. And then I pushed for it so hard that my program director was kind of like, all right, fine, well, you can go do it. And I'm so happy that I did, because it was incredible, right? And I wouldn't be here sitting here talking to you if I hadn't done
Exactly.
that.
Yeah.
And much less do and see all the cool stuff that I did there. One of the, yeah, like I specifically asked to go to Virgin Galactic when that was brought up as an option for our RAM rotations, our aerospace medicine residency rotations. I didn't have to go do that. Not all of us, not all of our RAMs did in my year. But so, I steered myself towards those things and then learned things, saw things, opened certain doors by steering myself towards those things. But I could never have anticipated that I was going to get the chance to go to Virgin Galactic or to even go to NASA, the Aerospace Medicine Corpsship, before I got into the RAM, right? Like, so I guess one of the biggest things I would just put out to everybody out there who's interested in space med is like, and maybe feeling a little bit overwhelmed by like, well, how do I get there? Is like just start talking to people and like one step at a time. What can you do to get yourself one step closer to space med, and what you want to ultimately be doing. And if you don't really know what you even want to be doing, but you just know you want to be involved in space med, I think that's okay too. um, because a lot of times I think you go in with thinking I want to do this, like I did with med school, go in thinking I want to be a neurosurgeon, and then come out being a GMO flight surgeon in the Air Force, right? Completely different
That is probably
outcome,
takes the cake for the biggest 180, right? Like that.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Like, again, if I was a 15-year-old me, like if you asked me to plan out my next 10 years, I could not have painted you a picture anywhere close to what things have come out this way. Even when I started in the Air Force, I couldn't have painted you a picture anywhere close to where I am now, right? And what I've done. So, I would say like spend you gotta have something that you're working towards, or not, I guess, but at some point, like you can't just be a ship unmoored and really get anywhere productively, right? So if you do want to, unless you just kind of want to do that and just see what happens and happenstance fall into something, like having a goal, whether proximal or a long-term goal is valuable for sure. But like you don't have to have it all figured out. And I would probably say that most people don't, even if they make it seem like they do. Um, so
Yeah, no,
yeah,
no plan survives contact with the enemy, right? Like,
exactly. So true. That's one of my favorite sayings because it's very true. And then you gotta take out a page out of REO Speedwagon's book and just roll with the changes. And but that's kind of one of the exciting parts of it too, right? Like it's not just, okay, you do this thing and then you do this thing and then you do this thing, and it's not just a linear process. It's kind of glorious chaos in a way, but yeah,
glorious chaos. That's I love that.
yeah, well, that's, or at least that's how my life's been. So
Yeah,
maybe
you just
some.
gotta explode generally forward.
There you
You can
go.
still explode, but that's what rockets are. Just generally go, the exhaust
Right.
going behind you generally, and then you generally go forward. There you go.
Exactly. Exactly. And then you make course corrections on the way as you can. So, yeah, but I would say that again, like anybody out there who wants to get involved in space medicine, this is the time to do it. Like,
Never been
this is
better.
it's never been,
I used to
yeah,
be like, oh man, I wish I grew up in the 50s and 60s so I could watch the Apollo program. But now I'm like, this is the time. This is it.
right. It really is. It's so exciting, man. Like so much stuff is going into putting more and more people and things into space. And yeah, this is a very exciting time where there's a ton of development going on. And so like it's a really cool opportunity to be a part of a new emerging chapter of humanity, without trying to sound too grandiose there. Like we really are kind of writing history in a way as aerospace medicine, as the aerospace medicine enterprise, as humanity, right? Um, in a way that like was only available really to a super select few back in the 50s or 60s or whatever, right? And so now it's opening up, and I think it's going to be every bit as impactful, if not more so, than the advent of aviation was to the way the world works, right? Or the advent of ship travel, and
Hmm.
shipbuilding. This is going to be a really cool new chapter for humanity. I just hope we use it properly and that we do, we do right by ourselves and whatnot, but that remains to be seen. But yeah, like cool time to be in this. And and again, like to emphasize, like it's expanding like big time, right? Like expanding really rapidly. So a lot of new opportunities and possibilities to be part of this, which is super cool.
Yeah, and I'm super excited to see where you land and where, like, I'll be following your journey from near and far. And if you ever come back to JSC and we're at JSC together, it'd be great to hang out again. And
Heck yeah, man.
it's just been such a nice catch up with you, man. Like it's so great to hear all these different experiences and perspectives, and just really appreciate the time you've taken today. Like I definitely learned a lot about like your day to day, like your story throughout, like all the different types of roles that aerospace medicine physicians can like play. Kind of where things are going is just it was really, really nice to just sit and hang out with you. So I really appreciate it.
Hey, well, thanks again. I appreciate you taking your time out of your evening. Especially on a weekend there, the start of a weekend anyway. I guess it's Saturday. I can't even remember. But yeah, so really appreciate it. Thank you. Like I said, it really is an honor to have somebody ask me to come talk on a podcast or whatever about my life. And sorry if I rambled a little bit, but
That's what
um,
podcasts are, man. Like it's the whole thing.
yeah, well, and it's really I hope somebody out there listens to this and gets some kind of help from it in some way. I certainly I'm always happy to take questions from anybody who is interested in reaching out to me, regardless of where you are in life or whatever. Happy to answer questions or help as much as I can for anybody. And yeah, it's been a real pleasure getting to talk with you again and catch up a bit. And s- uh, seems like seems like you're doing some pretty cool stuff and you know definitely hope we can hang out again. Are you going to go to asthma, by the way?
Yeah, yeah. So it's in Atlanta where I currently live about 30 to 40 minutes depending on traffic from downtown Atlanta. So
Amazing.
if you're, I don't know if you're coming, but
Yeah, so I'm going to be there. It sounds like so there's some question about funding, but I think we got the funding, so I should be there. So yeah, we got to hang out again when I'm there.
yeah,
We'll definitely.
I have two talks. You're not required to come, but they're all about
I would love
MSK
to.
stuff. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, I would love to. That sounds awesome, dude. I will try to be there for sure. But I should be at asthma, so we'll definitely catch up there and hang out again. So I promise I won't make you try Malort again.
And that was me pushing it on everyone. I was
That's
from,
fair.
I like, was doing the whole Chicago thing and lived there
That's
for like
valid.
10 years. I was like, hey, let's get some handshakes going. Let's go. And
Yep,
like,
yep.
what's that?
Gotta do, gotta do it. Oh man, that was a good time.
All right. Well, I'm gonna sign us off. Just thanks again, and we'll catch you on the next orbit. Thanks for listening to Let's Talk Space Medicine. If you want to continue the discussion and meet more fellow space nerds, be sure to check out at Talk Space Med on Twitter and the Let's Talk Space Medicine server on Discord. Thanks, and see you next orbit.